Hey everyone, welcome to Fiction Quest. Today, we're bringing you an incredible new movie on What if Naruto become the White Wolf of Sea and got Harem? Don't forget to subscribe and like this video before we begin. Let's get into the story. Hi sir. The teen whose body would rival that of an Olympic athlete replied monotonously, seemingly unaffected by the sharp hiss as the whip slashed his back as he walked over to a crate that rivaled in his size yet lifted it up and carried it like it was a feather. The bulbous guard huffed arrogantly as he left the large room, leaving the boy alone, thinking he wouldn't try anything stupid. If any of you are wondering, yes, the young boy over there is me. Who I am was of no importance to me in the moment. Where I was and why I was there was at the top of the list in the what the hell category I had in my head. I'm not sure if I'm even in Konoha or more particularly the elemental nations anymore. Well, after my supposed death due to giving Naruto that 1-second advantage to let him deal the finishing blow to Madara, which led to waking up in a cart full of other various beings, humans and giants, some mythical creatures, even large humanoid creatures with features that resemble fish chained up and being sent to a place called Mariajoy, especially the wonderful fact that I was a young boy again was good enough of a reason for me to start asking if I'm even in the same world anymore. For 4 years I've been in slavery and I'm still trying to bust my way out. Yes, a 16-year-old with the skill set and knowledge from a previous life of a Jonin shinobi that rivals cages hasn't found a way out of confinement yet. What boggles me is the way this new world works. No ninjas, no chakra, no knowledge of sake killing intent, the existence of haki, fruits that give you unimaginable powers yet would take away your ability to swim. The world is just a continent whose land stretched from the North Pole to the South, a section in the ocean where anything is possible and is impossible to navigate in. Luckily this imprisonment I was in didn't have any pale, sadistic pedophiles that were obsessed with jutsu and experimentations. Though most of my physical strength had been taken away with this biological age setback, I wasn't really worried. I could train that back and by the time I returned to my original age I would have reached my peak, possibly even more by then. Luckily my knowledge and mental skills hasn't deteriorated and I still had my large chakra reserves, though it meant I'm limited to low-class jutsu due to my younger body being unable to handle the stress of using the advanced skills I had learned in my years. Before I could analyze more of my situation and how I can overcome it, something broke through the wall, screams and flames can be heard in the distance. Oni-san. A young voice rattled me out of my thoughts. Turning around, I saw a young girl peeking out of a corner of boxes, a 16-year-old, same age as me though I was older than her by months, long black hair, her side locks went past her shoulders and were braided. Her hair framed her face up to her chin, and dark blue eyes that contrasted with my silver white eyes. Those are the main features that I could discern from her, well apart from her slender form and well-developed that wasn't really what I was focusing on. What I was focusing on was why Hancock was here without the knowledge of the slavers to begin with. Hancock, I asked in shock, dropping the large container carefully as to not alert any of the guards and walked quickly to her location, whispering loudly, "What are you doing here? Do the guards know you're missing? Do you know what would happen if they find you here?" Sending a barrage of worried questions at her. I came to Mariajoy the same day she and her sisters had come to this supposed Holy Land. Though I had no control over what they would assign them to be working on here, I still made it abundantly clear that they were not to be the nobles' playthings. Though they would still find some lesser harassment in working as simple maids for the nobles, it was a better deal than being constantly fondled and abused for the evil people's delight. From there I had earned the respect of the 3 sisters and the other slaves and possibly strengthened them in willpower and resolve to push for a revolt. The particular disgrace of these saints have earned me the many scars in my back that even today I wear in pride. It was better than nothing because they might end up with more dead higher-ups if they ever dropped the death sentence on me. She shushed me quickly when I finally got close to her, and from here I could also see the rest of the Boa family. Marigold and Sandersonia were with her as well. What was happening to the city? Luckily she had her hand over my mouth or I would have shouted out my confusion instead of worrying about the fact that I need to keep quiet. "We're escaping," Hancock quickly answered. "A red fishman is wreaking havoc on the nobles and the city in general. He seeks to free the slaves from this kingdom." Sandersonia continued, "You stuck out first without regretting and fearing death or worse punishment. To return the favor, we seeked you out so that we can continue fleeing from this city. There was a pregnant pause at that moment, and with this revelation and chance of a lifetime I made my decision. Keep running, I ordered them, shocking them of my sudden authoritative manner. I can't come with. Which shocked them greatly, but this time for what they thought was my refusal to be free. What? Why? Asked Marigold, the youngest of the three sisters. I have some unfinished business with this city and its denizens. I'm not about to leave my share to some fishman who had just appeared out of nowhere. I explained, and before they could retort about my reckless endeavor I continued. Last time I checked, you don't owe me anything. I told them, and there are still slaves imprisoned and I need to free them. I am not leaving even one behind. I explained as I started for the door. Wait, raven-haired beauty exclaimed, stopping me just as I reached the door. Will we ever see you again? She asked, shocking me and her two sisters. I flashed the same grin I gave them when the guards dragged me back to my cell after the nobles had whipped me years ago, bringing them some relief due to my self-confidence. I don't know, I answered, making Hancock droop in depression, to which I quickly remedied, but I am confident that we will someday, turning my grin into a more sincere, compassionate smile. The other just has to wait, will you? In response she nodded fervently and gave me a smile of her own. While her giant of a younger sister Sarsadonia asked me suspiciously, what? Bringing my attention to her, no, saying goodbye, giving her own smile in amusement to my cheesy line. I gave an amused smirk before replying, goodbyes are for when you are not gonna see the other ever again. I mused, leaving without saying farewells means I'm coming back one day, nay. But the last happy moment we would ever have before we could see each other again was interrupted by that same guard that cracked his whip at me when he entered the room. What are you doing, slave? ? Quote, shouting at me as he instantly spotted me but stuttered when he noticed the boa sister with me and realized that he was outnumbered. What are you doing here? Gwa. He tried to warn his companions, but before he could try to do so I had backhanded him in the head, smashing through the glass helmet he was wearing, sending him into a deep shock for sharing the same air with us commoners, and I quickly smashed his face to oblivion while I was at it. All of this done on reaction without even looking behind me. Looking back to the sisters who wore shocked expressions on their faces, though they had seen me kill with such skill before, they still might not be used to the fact that I could do the deed so easily that I could do it solely on instinct and with no regrets after taking a life. And don't worry about me. I briefly released my sake for them to witness the true level of my power, and enough to be sent throughout city to inform this red fishman of my presence and striking every Tenryubido with sudden fear, possibly some killing them out of shock alone. I was holding back last time, I told them darkly as I body flickered out of the room to the rooftops before heading over to location of the various prison cells. Finally arriving to the entrance of the prison chambers after minutes of shunshing over the rooftops, I reached the entrance of the prison quarters and I encountered something I expected from the scum of this city. A group of guards were holding down the large doors that led to the prisons where the slave were held at, and judging from the roars and banging on the gate meant there were still some who were trapped in the other side. Along with the said guards were some of the Tenryubido who were shouting orders at them while holding pistols at them at point-blank range. Guess even the guards of these world scum share some form of distrust with them. Quickly finding a solution to this predicament, I spotted shards of broken glass near me, grabbing the longer, more jagged shards, imbuing the makeshift throwing knives with chakra. I set my aim with half-assed seriousness and threw, nailing each of the shouting Tenryubido in the head. Wondering what had happened to the Tenryubido with the sudden silence, the sound of stabbing and a series of thuds, they turned to look behind them and had looked fearful of the sight before them. 3 of the world nobles, on the floor, dead, with glass protruding from the back of their heads, and behind them, me, the rumored monster slave of Mariajoy who had slain dozens of the finest of Marines and greatly injured a vice admiral before being subdued. Smirking at the terrified look on their faces, I decided to ham it up a bit more. Pointing my thumb behind me, I merely said, I'll give you a 10-minute head start, emanating my killing intent to physical form so that they could see a white wolf twice my size behind me, looking at them in hunger. In a heartbeat, the shell-shocked guards ran with all their strength to the kingdom's exit. Some of them were even stripping off pieces of their armor so they could run faster. That would definitely add to my name if they managed to survive and report to their superiors. But now, without the opposing force that it keeping the wooden gates closed, the tall objects finally gave into all the stress as its hinges broke and the doors fell down, right in front of me. With the obstructions gone, my eyes encounter the sight of a group of chained people, a mix of races, humans dominant in numbers. A few dwarves were standing on the shoulders of the men and women. There were even 3 majestic mermaids being carried by the men of the group. Having dismissed my sake before the gates fell down, I pulled away my sadistic side for my concern of the imprisoned to take its place. Is this all of you? Are there any more still trapped? I questioned them quickly, wanting to get with my business and their freedom as fast as possible. With a shake of heads from the group I sighed and relied, strengthening my hands with chakra as I snapped each of their chains and collars one by one, each one of them amazed at my strength and the surprise of the diffusing of the slave collars without it exploding. Once I was done, I motioned for them to follow me, which they silently obeyed, and soon I gave my input. Turning to them again after walking a few blocks from the gallows, I said, "We're getting out of here." After the group's cheers and sighs of relief, I continued, "I need someone who can lead this group out of the city, who knows the fastest way out." To that, a tall muscular merman with a fish's tail for a lower body and a young skinny girl with brown ragged raised their hand. Both of them seemed to have some form of familiarity between each other, possibly saw each other as a father and daughter figures. The girl answered, "We were previously tasked to deliver parcels through various nobles, so we know the city inside out." To that the larger man nodded his confirmation. "Good." Grabbing a torch, some rags, and creating a makeshift torch and giving it to the girl, continuing, "Lead the others out of the city. I'll create a distraction for you." Everyone would focus more on the rampaging beast than a group of runaway slaves. "Hi," came from the stoic merman. "Arigato Oni-san," said the young girl, giving a genuine happy grin but seemed to be instilled with paranoia and fear, but in hopes of alleviating her dilemma I replied by putting a calming smile on my face. With the confirmation from the two, they began leading the large group out as I jumped to the rooftops to find the tallest building in the kingdom. Reaching one of the towers, I gained excellent view of the kingdom, the various main paths and highways. I see various groups of slaves, nobles and guards running for the exits, the bastards not caring for anything but their own lives, even trampling over the bodies of their own allies while the slaves were running there was no tomorrow, intent on never getting captured again. I can even see the group I encountered back in the chambers. The girl, torch in hand, led at the front, causing more and more of the enslaved to follow their one group. Somehow in that little moment, that young kid reminded me of a certain blonde brat, who wished to become Hokage, who changed the ninja world by storm, inspired figures that became unique, great, those who united all ninja, those who were redeemed. This one person, bringing more people together in his way, one by one, step by step. And someone like me will be there, giving them that vital lift to get to the end, even if it meant my end would come, alone, overwhelmed, dead. Though I had accepted this fate, I had been forced into a line of self-sacrifice and service to others. I was forced into a life of risking my own life for others, to assist the innocent in every way, to be given all these expectations that rises as the years go by, and I have to accept it to be something as natural as breathing. My damn vows. That damned snake. Looks like I have something to thank him for all those experiments with all the failures I have endured in my career as a ninja. Gathering all the evil and traumatizing memories which I locked up in my head, all the deaths of my comrades, the men I failed to lead and protect, the civilians and innocent who were under my responsibility, my adoptive family. I nearly threw up due to all the hate and depression that was flowing through my chakra system, breaking it down and deteriorating it while I forced all that malice and dark energy to form a separate entity. You never had a family to begin with. You were the only one who believed in the White Fang. My only goal is in the darkness. You failed your comrades, just like you failed your nakama. Hope is an illusion. This world, I don't care about it anymore. Self-sacrifice is easier to say than do. While I walk towards my real dream, I'll enjoy fighting you. All you needed to do was to fall once, and all that would turn around into deep hatred for the world. It's already over. I'm sorry, my Masuko, son, if only I could see your face. Hokuer OU. Entering my own world, the sounds of flames and screams were non-existent in my mind. I controlled my taxed breathing as dark chakra was forcibly pulled from my body. Returning to the world around me, I opened my eyes to see the darker side of myself before me, looking exactly like me when I was in my prime, years older than me, wearing the signature leaf, flak jacket, face mask and forehead protector with the leaf symbol that covered both his eyes. Even though I couldn't see his face, I could practically sense him smirking in arrogance. This holy land will be tested whether it can withstand the inferno of the leaf that can outlast and overwhelm even Amaterasu itself. Looks like you need my help, lapdog, my alter ego mocked in a vain attempt to enrage me so he could take over my body more easily. Yes, indeed I do. I confirmed his statement, which made him faceful before bringing up a tough face and demanding to know what I wanted. I ordered to him, there's some insects that need to be exterminated, let's flush them out of their nests. My darker side gave a grin of approval. You're getting closer to accepting your true nature, I'm proud of you. Ruffling my hair in mirth before standing behind me, facing back to back and preparing to burn this kingdom. We both formed the horse hand seal. I roared as my nearly half my chakra reserves formed up in my mouth, the sheer magnitude of the chakra causing moderate stress to my body, preparing to unleash Inferno. I flung my head backwards before leaning forward, putting my mouth closer to my hands holding the seal, fire style, great fire annihilation. I roared as a line of fire spewed from my mouth that quickly spread out a kilometers and engulfed about half of the kingdom, while my darker side covered the other half. Pav young girl location outside Mariajoy. I looked in amazement and fear as I looked back at the slowly receding view of Mariajoy, only to find a giant inferno engulf the kingdom. The rest of the guys, even Tu-san, had a shocked yet slight amusement in the sight before them. Trying to find anything visible left my eyes set upon one of the towers which held an individual and a shadowy figure which I couldn't recognize that had put me in immediate worry. My hero, our savior, Hokuro the monster slave, was spewing forth fire from his mouth which fed the unrelenting flames below him. But before I could shout to the rest, Oni-san and the shadow had stopped unleashing their wrath on the city and vanished, only after images were left that were slowly fading away as the fires that were left still burned unrelenting. Please be safe, I pleaded in my mind as I remained worried despite the admiration of Oni-san's strength, continuing on the responsibility he gave to me, to lead these people to freedom. And with that, I continued to run away from the city as we silently prayed for our hero's safety. Pav Hancock location bridge leading to the outside front entrance of the kingdom. Oni-sama, Marigold, my youngest sister shouted to me, making me turn to her as she pointed back to the kingdom as it seemed that she couldn't trust her own words to explain the sight before her. Turning to her view, I took a step back, mouth agape as I couldn't comprehend what I saw before me. Mariajoy, the place we considered a living hell, was replaced by a giant wall of fire which blocked our view of the city. This was in no way possible, someone must have caused this. White eyes, Sandersonia mumbled in sadness, where my confusion to her statement quickly turned to worry after I realized who she was referring to. Oni-san, he couldn't still be in there, I thought in distress as the ferocity of the inferno only kept rising. But suddenly I remembered the times when he has spoken to us. Flashback, 4 years ago. All right, he's had enough, get him to his cell, no food for a week. Ordered the world noble next to me, trying to act tough, desperately trying to find something that would benefit them here as he was the one demonstrating the Tenryujima's more humane punishments, which to them meant constant lashes in the back for hours. This was supposed to be a sad demonstration for slaves, but it somehow turned to something comical as the white-eyed teen was deadpanning the entire time, at some points even stating a life facts, getting laughs from even the guards. Though the nobles were livid that the boy wasn't reacting the way they were expecting. But what was shocking to all of us was the considerable resistance and strength he had, the notched whip leaving only bruises on his skin instead of leaving gaping wounds. And in the entire time of the punishment I sensed some form of aura emanating from him which seems to strengthen his durability. Was it some form of haki? It couldn't be one as it had no physical manifestation. This kid was more of a mystery the more you learn about him. After such a humiliating demonstration for the presenters, the guards were quick to release the boy from the harness, chain him and drag him back to the gallows, but the path they crossed was the area where I was and it looked like the boy had more to say. Hold it, he ordered the guards and the fearsome pair immediately halted to his commands. Though the noble near me was shouting something incoherent beside me, somehow everything tuned out for my hearing aside from the boy's voice as he rose his head to show me a happy grin, asking, "You all right?" Seemingly uncaring of his current situation and more focused on me. And despite the circumstances, I blushed under his genuinely happy and chivalrous attitude. Hi. I meekly stuttered my confirmation, "Why am I feeling like this?" His grin faded to a more calm smile, merely saying, "Good," even leaving me as a bigger stuttering mess before turning to the shouting noble, immediately losing the kind attitude at his mere presence, a mysterious aura manifesting into a darker shadow that resembled a silhouette of a wolf. It even had a red eye glowing from it. "Hopefully we got the issue taken care of right, Jii-sama?" Asking in a dark yet polite tone while growling out like a wolf, making some people near us sweat in fear, yet it looks like my sisters and I are the only ones unaffected by this. Yes," the noble quickly answered, laughing nervously at the glare he was receiving. "Indeed, haha, this fine woman and her two sisters will get a proper occupation of servitude to us, simple house maidens, nothing malicious whatsoever." Ha ha ha. His explanation about his argument with the boy, surprising me and my sisters. Why would he go out of his way and risk his life for us? Good. The boy's happy expression immediately returned before turning to me again, giving another calm persona. "If any of you need help, I'll be there," he finally said before he asked the guards to finally send him back to his cell. Who is that guy? I wondered. Flashback end. "You all right? If any of you need help, I'll be there. You don't owe me anything." I was holding back last time. Remembering his previous words, I suddenly realized I had been underestimating him. He had this time to show his power and strengths, yet I'm still worried of his well-being when I should be confident of his abilities. If I keep at this, if I ever faced against him one day, he would defeat me easily. Turning to my siblings, I reassured them that he was all right before turning back to the path we decided on and continued to run. They both asked how and why. I merely stated, "This is likely one of the strengths he was holding back from us." And from there the rest of our journey was silent before Sandersonia wondered something aloud. What was his name? That was a good point actually. All these years and he had yet to mention his name to us. Sure, the rest of the fellow slaves knew his identity, but it was likely he wanted them to keep silent from us. But before we could delve further, a note with a feather attached to it flew to the current of the wind and stopped right in front of me. Opening it, it read, "Dear Boa Hancock, sorry if I couldn't get to you, but it seems I'm busy dealing with something. I am confident we will meet each other again. It would be interesting to spar against you one day. So become stronger, become beautiful and wise, kind and intelligent. There is much potential in you. Hopefully this letter reaches you. If not, my skill at throwing must have seriously degraded. Hokuro de Seftis, White Wolf of Death. I pondered at the meaning of his name as we continued to run, as far away from this place and closer to our freedom. Pav Tiger Fish, Boss Sama, a shark fishman shouted at me during the walk of our exodus from the holy ground. Look. Pointing back at the kingdom. What I saw left me intrigued as to who was powerful enough to cause such a phenomenon. What I saw was two giant streams of flame which engulfed the entire kingdom, the twin infernos originating from two individuals, both them human. One of them was a young boy in his teens, wearing rags with bandages taped to his hands and feet, the cuff and chains confirming my suspicion that he was a fellow slave. So that's the monster slave that's everyone has been talking about. I knew I felt his presence in the kingdom, if only for a while. I thought to myself as I remember a flash of pain running over me, but nothing I couldn't handle, but the Tenryubitos and their guards were choking from the pressure. But the other individual with him was more of a mystery even through the way he dressed. Navy blue uniform with red swirls on each arm, green jacket, blue headband over eyes. He didn't look like an admiral or marine, he wasn't any pirate I recognized. Both humans seemed to emanate auras of their own, surprising for me as I couldn't recognize them as a form of hockey, but what shocked me the most was that both of their auras were contrasting and were battling each other for dominance. The older one's aura was pure black, full of malice, while the boy's aura was a bright white, pure. Before I could assess more, the two of them stopped the surge of fire before disappearing to whatever destination they're heading to. I can't help but think that this won't be the last time I'll meet those two. I thought aloud to my fellow fishmen's confusion before putting up shocked faces and trying to catch up as I had already gone ahead of them. Pav Saint Roswald, I knew that that brat would be nothing but trouble, he was literally a bad omen given form, but no, he could become an asset they said, he will submit they said, now this happened. I mumbled loudly as I led my children out of the city and on the way to the nearest marine outpost. Well, here's one of the world's scum lapdog. A deep, husky voice mocked. Looking behind us, what I saw before me greatly confused me and greatly scared me. Two men, one mature, one young, the former looking at us in bloodlust, the latter glaring solely at me in indifference. The mature man wore an all-navy blue uniform with red swirls patched onto the sides of his shirt's arms. Over that was a green jacket. He wore a face mask and a headband. Attached to it was a metal plate which had a leaf symbol engraved on it. He was no Marine. While the other man was a certain individual I hoped that I would never meet. Slicked back spiked hair, pure white eyes, tattered clothes, broken cuffs and chains, Cephas, the monster slave. Looking on in fear, I fell back in shock as through the older mon's gaze I saw myself dying in multiple ways. I immediately put myself in a kneeling position and started begging for my family's lives. Please spare us, I tore up, earning a silent stare from Cephas and a huff of arrogance from the enigma of a man while my children looked in shock at my submissive position. Taking the two blades that I managed to grab from my home before we ran, and offered it to both of them, please. Repeating myself once more, getting an interested look from the masked man and a more angry stare from the young monster slave. Take this as a sign of goodwill, I have children. Continuing to plead for my family's continued existence, which brought the masked man to an unamused stance and a pitying stare from the young one once I brought morals into the situation when I mentioned my son and daughter. The masked man took both of the blades and gracefully unsheathed them, looking at the two 6-shotgun blades in marvel. Interesting, exotic, the masked man finally voiced, makes for a mixed, unpredictable style of fighting. Complimenting on the two blades, already having a good idea on how to use them in good effect, before returning them to their sheaths and tossing them to the younger man while nodding to him. We have a deal. He agreed facing to me, before nodding to the younger man again, who returned the nod with a silent glare before following him in his destination. Away from us. Silently I wholeheartedly thanked all the deities in the land for such a miracle with us barely escaping with our well-being fully intact. But my proud son Roswald had possibly done the most idiotic thing possible, which meant the damning of our lives. Taking up a nearby dead guard's pistol, he aimed it at Cephas, shouting, "You are the scum, you commoners." Before pulling the trigger, the masked man, again, with his actions now confirming my fears, had flashed in front of the bullet's path, the speeding ball of lead doing absolutely nothing to him. Allowing us to have a moment of shock, the masked man walked menacingly towards my son, who still had a face full of fear, standing completely still as if looking in the eye of death himself despite the older man masking his entire face. Now standing at arm's length of my son, he put forward his hand over my son's head, his hand clutched as a fist. I feared that he would crush my son, but what he had done had shocked me to my very core. He released his grip and what he had in his hand was both impossible and insane. The bullet. The ball of lead dropping on my son's glass helmet, creating a crack on the very thing that had kept his integrity free and also creating a light ping sound had brought him back to his senses. Roswald screamed, dropping the flintlock before he tried to run back to me, which had been halted by the masked man by gripping on his glass helmet, threatening to break it and crush my son's head in the process, both shaming him and killing him. I was in whole shock at that entire moment. Being able to do nothing for my son as the only thing my body was capable of doing was stare. More shockingly, that was the time my daughter who decided to act, having more wits than a more wise noble like me. "Let go of my brother," she shouted in tears, picking up the dropped flintlock by the barrel and started hitting the masked man with it as her eyes teared up more. The masked man formed a darker aura around him as he now stared at the non-existent threat to him, prompting more screaming and thrashing about from my son, but my daughter, Shalulia, never wavered, continuing in her effort to free her brother. Now my efforts of saving my family were crushed. If I could just be as foolhardy as her, I depressingly thought, as this was likely the end for us three. But what happened next was even a mystery to me than the question as to who were these two monsters. The masked man had suddenly dropped my son, allowing Roswald to finally run up to me, hugging me like I would disappear if he let go, and cried. The man then kneeled with his one knee as he faced Shalulia, my daughter was struck by fear once more, unable to move as the masked man's full attention was on her now. He then proceeded, to the slave kid's surprise, remove his headband, revealing his eyes to us. Both had fully red sclera and iris. In the center were 3 stretched triangles that were evenly spaced around the pupil, curving at the top around the eye, forming a pinwheel. Each of us except for the kid and the masked man were stunned at his unnatural eyes. The very eyes itself were beckoning us to look at it, pulling us into a false sense of security. The man then reached out for her. Shalulia wavered, but the red-eyed man was now completely docile when it came to his attitude for her, being slow and easy on his reach. And did another physically impossible feat, his hand going through the glass with both body part and transparent object remaining completely intact as he ruffled the girl's head. "Good, you know well," he complimented, surprising us with his complete change of attitude. "Protecting your family is above all," giving her an absolutely genuine eye smile, completely calming her of her fears. Turning to me and my son, he called out, "Hey, runt," shouting to my son how was pulled out of his stupor. "If you think you can just kill me just like that, remember you're letting go of everything that is protecting you from me. So you better get stronger before you try something stupid again," he advised before he stood up and returned on his was to the opposite path. Cephas commented, "Never thought you had it in you, older me." What was he talking about? The older man merely laughed and remarked, "I just want you to not carry everyone's burdens and expectations for yourself and actually live your life, you know." Leaving the young beast baffled before they both disappeared in a flash. I couldn't tell how long we were still there, as still as a rock. Shalulia had a far-off look in her eyes, while Roswald had a fiery, determined look in his. After a while, possibly hours, a regiment of Marines had arrived, including Vice Admiral Sakazuki. "Lord Roswald," Sakazuki shouted, "are you hurt?" No, we're fine," I replied, tired. What took them so long? While I relaxed, I could clearly see the rage in the eyes of my children, clearly due to the timing of the Marines. "Let's go, I've had enough for today," I told them. Now they visibly relaxed and each of them held my hands as I walked them, in escort of the Vice Admiral and a group of Marines he selected, while the rest ran into the still burning city, in effort to save what's still left inside the Inferno. We didn't even bother requesting a mount to ride on. Walking along path sounds like a good way to dull my head of all the stress right now. Killzone 4. It had been about a week since the destruction of the corrupt kingdom of Mariajoy, with a low number of world nobles still surviving from the encounter. Hinging into various settlements and marine outposts, I had managed to gain information of how the enemy side had assessed the situation. The near absolute destruction of the kingdom had amassed about billions of damage costs, properties were unrecoverable and even the stone foundations were turned to soot. Only a few hundred of world nobles still live, thousands of them died in the Inferno, but inspecting their burnt corpses still managed to attain knowledge of their previous death wounds before they were burnt alive or dead. Though it was found out that there were no children deaths, hundreds of Tenryubito died to trampling, others died to blunt wounds of heavy cuts suspected to be caused by makeshift weapons, which meant my kills would be masked so they wouldn't know about my kills as they would stand out, or were simply stamped to death when they were running for the exits. But one type of wound was strange compared to the rest of the wounds. Giant cannon shot wounds, large gashes on bodies and larger than average bullet wounds. The slaves were presumed to be using makeshift weapons so they couldn't be using blades or flintlocks, and it was impossible for them to be carrying such firepower like a cannon with them, so one culprit could be pointed out. A Red Sea bream fishman, Fisher Tiger. Apparently he was a former slave years before and had come back to liberate all slaves, as he did not discriminate against freeing non-merpeople, and the absolute skills he had, which was shown when he destroyed part of the kingdom and freed all the slaves on his own, had caused him to earn my full respect and gratitude. That also meant he would become an enemy of the world government, due to his assistance at destroying the Holy Land, killing saints and stealing their property, had earned him a wanted poster with a bounty of 230 million belly. Looks like his future ventures to land would be hindered more oftenly. But one piece of information did intrigue me though. It looks like I myself had earned 2 wanted posters, one for my Yami dark side and one for me, with the alive option crossed out surprisingly. Looks like I had pissed off the nobility, no thanks to their stupidity, and received a bounty price of 380 million belly. Interesting, I did make them constipate in rage. Though I had earned a good Name right off the bat, which meant they took me seriously. Maybe, with that high of a price on my head, this means that I would become a living, walking taboo, to the rest of the civilized world. Merchants won't barter with me, taverns and inns wouldn't let me enter, relax and rest, and people would be running to the Marines to alert them of my presence. Looks like I need to refine my henge to not pop from a single punch, whoops. But now that I earned such a infamous name, I needed to get off the red line. This place is the world government's territory, and people would soon get suspicious of unknown people entering and leaving settlements at strange times and moving and coming from the main forest. I've already done well gaining good supplies and surviving in the woods, but it's getting more risky moving in and out of settlements as they gain more marine garrisons. Looks like they're really intent on catching me. Looks like my only option left is to head out to sea. Well, I could just walk on the sea, though I pride myself with having a high chakra reserve that borders between cage and a tailed beast while impossibly still retaining a extremely precise chakra control. It would still get me nowhere, and running would only get me more lost, so I'll need to find a ship to get out of the city. I hinged into my older form, when I was in my early 20s, but wearing a simple shirt, shorts, and wore a conical straw hat and wooden sandals, and catched a ride on a farmer's cart who was on the way to a town near the edge of the sea. If I could find a ship and a crew that might take me in, that was my best shot. Reaching the entrance of the town, I dropped off the cart and gave part of my berries to the farmer in thanks and headed over to the main tavern the city has. Looks like I don't have to look around much. I deadpanned in my mind as when I entered through the door, my eyes set upon a massive brawl, a large mix of pirates, marines and bandits duking it out with fists, feet and drinks. I calmly walked through the drunken chaos around me, effortlessly dodging all the half-assed punches, kicks and thrown people or objects that went my general direction while I headed for the bar counter. Reaching the counter, I grabbed a wooden stool that was thrown at me and used that as my seat, noticing a young girl hiding under the counter while the giant bulk of a buffed man was beside her, cleaning mugs swiftly and flawlessly, completely unfazed with the chaotic brawl in this institute. "Hi, I'd like a mug of rum," I asked cheeringly, giving a happy grin to calm down the nerves of the young barmaid, earning a small, shy smile from her and an expectant stare from the giant. Reaching behind me, I grabbed a small leather bag that was attached to my belt, dropping it to the table and opening it to reveal it full of gold belly coins, exactly 250. Reaching for the bag, the giant weighed the bag of coins in his hand before huffing and giving out the bag to the girl and started preparing a mug, the girl stuttering a "thank you" as well. Finishing with filling the mug with rum, he slid it over to my side, which I took and gave a nod, and from there, begun my silent assessment of the brawlers. Sadly, I was disappointed, as almost all of them were worse than civilians turned academy students, even those normal kids who intended to just graduate as genin and then return to their normal lives would be able to beat these guys down in 5 minutes. But one individual seemed to pique my interest. His strength is being hidden, suppressed, good, because if it was left to roam free, it would mean the death via suffocation of everyone aside from me in this room by merely being near its presence. Entering the tavern through the door, I spot the point of interest, looking incredulous and silly to the violence around him. Long, black cape over his shoulders, loose trousers cut below the knee, a simple buttoned shirt which was only buttoned halfway, a red sash tied to his waist that is holding a saber on his right side, and a straw hat. Striking red hair and 3 scars across his left eye. Red-haired, Shanks, the captain of the red-haired pirates. Seems like the 2 staff members of the bar apart from me were also the ones to notice his presence and became wary of his appearance here while I analyzed him for his strengths. Compared to my entrance into this gentleman's institute and striding through the brawl, he looked like a bumbling idiot as he tripped and tumbled his way over to the counter, getting hit from all sides, causing him to hit some of the patrons to the wall or to other patrons and causing more fights to break out. While the giant laughed full of mirth while the young girl's sweat dropped at the clumsiness of the infamous captain, I mentally praised him for his effortless attempt of deceiving people of his true powers, though the giant bartender was more wise than what others, and with what I could analyze from his looks he wasn't so fooled his act. Finally reaching the counter, coincidentally, a wooden stool was thrown over this way, though unlike my skill of grabbing the projectile in instinct despite it coming from my blind side, Shanks' stool hit his head, causing more laughter from the giant and a half-worried and half-mirthful look from the young girl as I acted like a man that was entirely focused on his drink as he grumbled in annoyance while a bump was bulging from the spot where he was hit with the flying wooden seat. Finally ordering a similar mug of rum, he finally relaxed on his seat, arms on the counter as he seemed content with his drink. And now two individuals sat together. Both were simple in looks. One wore a conical hat and a straw hat, each item bearing significant history. Both were walking powerhouses, hiding their powers and keeping secret from the others about their true strength. "So, Shanks, heard you a strong warrior." I broke the silent stalemate between us, knowing that he already knows of me masking my identity by the time I sensed his powers. Though I earned a stare from the giant and a worried and shocked look from the girl, the redhead meekly replied, laughing, "I don't really see myself as strong man, though a lot seem to think that I could easily beat them, haha." Easily sensing I meant no ill intent in my statement. Continuing on, my Act 1 continued on my assessment of him from the information I gathered. Captain of the Red Hair Pirates, one who carries a giant bounty over his head, and one of the 4 Yonko of the sea. Which intensified the stare from the giant, which turned into a more cautious assessment of me while the girl became more worried over my life. Shanks merely grinned and replied, "True on all accounts, why do you ask?" Getting straight to the point of my intentions. But before I could explain further, the door to the bar slammed open, getting the attention of the entire tavern. The reactions were mixed. The Marines that were in the brawl immediately cleaned themselves of bloody cuts and noses and dusted off their uniforms and quickly stood in attention while the pirates and the bandits moved back in fear. A large figure marched through the doors, a vice admiral coat hung over the shoulders, wearing a red suit with a red floral shirt underneath, black gloves and the marine cap. Emanating a volcanic red glow as he seemed intent on reaching the counter, glaring at the red-haired captain the entire time. "I don't know why you would come here, but you are under arrest," he growled out, using his powers to heat up the entire room, signifying that he would use his powers on Shanks if he ever resisted. This damn fool, willing to sacrifice innocence for his so-called justice, yet ignores the slavery that the world nobles thrive upon. Standing up from my seat, I stood face to face against him, glaring at him with all my hate, releasing my sake and condensing it to only affect him. He'll figure out who I am if that group of guards did survive and escape. Looks like it did its job, as I could clearly see the reflection of a white wolf in his eyes, and how his permanently stoic face turned into a slightly wary face with his mouth slowly agape in intimidation. "Take this outside, I'd rather not have the lives of innocents be harmed by your arrogance," I threatened, which brought focus back into the Vice Admiral's mind and thankfully took my words at face value and walked outside to bring the confrontation there, with Shanks following right behind, the captain giving me a look that told of his approval of getting myself involved to assure the safety of the civilians, and went out the door along with the Vice Admiral while the rest of the occupants were looking at me in great shock. A civilian, a new nobody that had just come into town, had just intimidated a Vice Admiral and succeeded into having Sakazuki follow his demands. Grabbing a larger leather bag from my waist, I dropped it on the counter and opened it to reveal another bag filled with belly coins with some paper bills rolled inside, in total counting up to 5,000 belly to be exact. I merely said, "For the damages and the inconvenience," before heading out myself. Catching up to the Marine and the pirate, I guessed their location to be somewhere near the docks, so I started there. I wasn't disappointed as an explosion was heard in one of the storehouses, with a slight fire starting with civilians leaving the area and Marines pushing in. Looks like Shanks himself has gotten some backup. I mused as 2 people were with him getting on a back-to-back position. One had tight curled hair and a long nose, a simple blue shirt and slaked pants, wearing a blue headband which had the name, Usopp, written on it, wielding a musket pistol. The other was a head taller than Shanks, jet black hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing a black V-neck shirt, a yellow sash tied to his waist, khaki cargo pants and black combat boots, wielding a musket by its barrel to be used as a club. I knew that they would be able to hold this Marine group off, but I really don't agree with the resulting damage that would be struck upon the town, and it also looks like they'll soon bite off more than they can chew once the main force arrives here, I noted as I see a large amount of dust gathering in one of the main roads in the distance, most likely the Marines' reinforcements. Well, they're my best shot of getting out of the red line, and they need my help getting back to their ship. Looks like I'm their escape plan. Shunshing over to them, surprising the majority of the group except for the Vice Admiral and Shanks, the latter grinning to the return of my presence, I continued my silence as I prepared to open the exit for the pirates. Using the shock factor of my instant appearance, I slowly, in shinobi standards, start going through the hand signs while I notified to the trio, "You might want to grab onto my shoulders." Looking to Shanks for guidance, the captain nodded to them as he did what I asked before the two would trust me on this. Finishing in my seals I chanted, "Earth release," hiding like a mole technique, causing face faults and a series of "what?"s throughout the docks before disappearing with the trio under the ground, with the traces and cracks of me digging through the earth slow disappearing. "Hiding like a mole, really?" asked the curled-haired gunslinger incredulously. "Hey," I shouted in annoyance, "I'm not the one who names the techniques, so don't look at me," I growled out. The tall man was more relaxed than his annoyed companion, calmly getting to the matter at hand. "Though we are thankful for the assist, why do you seek us though?" His stare becoming more calculating of any deception. Sighing, I began to tell my half-truth of a life story of waking up in chains and finding myself becoming a slave in the kingdom of Mariajoy. All while absent-mindedly watching the marine group above us frantically look for our location, with the Vice Admiral livid for allowing the escape of 4 very dangerous criminals. I explained to them, I was on a merchant ship years before, our group doing good with trading throughout the islands of East Blue. But that had all changed when one day, where we were just happily sailing the seas, we were just attacked by a ship for no reason. Our ship, owned by traveling civilians, had no way of defending ourselves and shortly got wrecked. By now I had noticed the controlled anger from the 3 of them, but I continued nonetheless. I woke up in a horse cart, chained up along with other various races, being shipped to the Holy Land of Mariajoy. I don't know that had happened to my friends after that. Even with communicating with almost every enslaved in the kingdom, none of them had known of my friend's fate. For 4 long years, I had worked in forced servitude before something happened which allowed me and the rest of the slaves to escape. "Have you heard of the destruction of Mariajoy?" Getting nods of confirmation, I revealed more about the incident. A Fisher Tiger was an adventurer that at some point was captured and enslaved by the world nobles before managing to escape. It seems that he had returned once more to free the rest of the slaves and burn the city. He seemed so intent on his goal that from what I had learned that he broke the taboo of climbing the red line with his bare hands. The revelation showed shock to the strength and will Tiger had while I continued with my story. Luckily he held no discrimination when it came to freeing the slaves, so he set out to free all of us as he took on the entire city. In the chaos, I managed to free more of the slaves that were trapped when he was still preoccupied and escaped as the kingdom burned. Finishing with my story, now came the reason as to why I would help them. The world government has issued wanted posters for all the property of the saints to be acquired and returned. I don't know if the others made it, but I'm confident that they know full well that staying in the red line is too dangerous for any of us now. So my group separated, the close friends and families though stick together, to prevent the Marines from capturing us all so easily. Civilian ships won't take me, and with my mark, I'd be sent off to the nearest Marine in an instant. Pulling up the sleeve of my right arm to reveal something which I took note to keep even when I changed my looks with Henge. It was the hoof of the dragon brand, the mark of the world noble's property, the mark of the slaves. Thankfully the 3 looked sympathetic to me, though they did pull back in shock when they say the brand in my arm, but their eyes held a look of pity about my situation, and honestly they should have expected this to be on my person when I became a slave. Shanks looked contemplative. "We'll consider it." I gave out a sigh of relief. At least they didn't say no. That was probably the closest thing I could get to an agreement. I just needed to prove to them that I was worth the trouble. "We still need to know what you can do." Stating out that he needed to know my abilities. Wait. Wasn't me being able to dig through the earth and create a room enough for us 4 to fit already a showcase of a part of my abilities? I deadpanned at him, to which his face lit up and laughed in realization. "Geez, so the captain can be a bit of an airhead at times." "Where is your ship anyway?" I asked in confusion. "I didn't see your Jolly Roger sailing in any of the ships in the docks." Luckily the tall, musket-wielding marksman answered this time. "Do you really think we'd just let ourselves get noticed by the Marines so easily?" Correcting my assumptions while the captain laughed awkwardly at the words of the tall man, "Was Shanks really that clueless? were currently anchored off the coast of the nearby cliffs. We're well acquainted with the family that was living in the area and lets us anchor near there as to hide our presence. Right, so we got that cleared up. Right, I replied more relaxed, dusting off my trousers as I inquired them again. What direction is your friend's house? I could easily take us there underground. Getting more shocked faces from the three. Would you rather prefer being chased by an entire regiment of Marines and a Vice Admiral as you head for your ship? And with that, Yassip, headband-wearing guy gleefully agreed to my help, while the tall man hummed thoughtfully as he pulled out a cigarette to smoke while Shanks merely grinned at my hospitality. It's in this general direction, Shanks said, pointing to the left side of the Earth Dome. Nodding to the captain, I issued the same command like before and prepared a different technique to quickly reach the destination. Earth release. Subterranean voyage. I chanted as the ground around us slowly turned to liquid and I swam with a speed that would make even the shark swordsman of Kurigakure look like a sprinting sloth in comparison. Pav. Location: a coastal home in the red line. Are you sure they are fine? I asked my Oji-san again. I was so worried for our friend's safety as there were so many Marines around, even a Vice Admiral. Who knows what could happen? Don't worry about them. My uncle stated, from what I could read from them and that young kid earlier, they wouldn't fall so easily. He reassured, being delicate and careful when he ruffled my hair, causing me to pout, but I guess he has a point. Shanks may be strong, but there had been a large increase of Marine numbers in settlements and patrols. He could beat groups of them with a flick of the wrist, but he would get overwhelmed. That young man earlier was so nice as well. He didn't have to risk his life for Shanks, yet he went through with it, but he was able to face a Vice Admiral and cause him to look at him in fear was a really big surprise. He didn't even need to pay even more for the damage the ruffians that were brawling in the bar. He's powerful yet so kind. That is so rare to see in people today. Shanks is like that, but meeting equally strong and like-minded individuals on the same day is just strange. But before I could wonder more about who the man was, Uncle and I spot something coming at us in the plains. It looked like the land was being split in two as dirt and dust was being flung up. It looked similar to water parting when a shark is swimming a bit above water. My uncle immediately went to my front, likely to protect me from the strange phenomenon, while I looked in wonder at who could be the causing it. My questions were answered when suddenly 4 people were flung skyward from the phenomenon that I thought to be a land shark. Pav Hokuro. Whoops. Looks like I hit that small rock there with that miscalculation. The 3 seemed to be taking the problem differently. The Yassip guy was screaming, the tall guy was still smoking and acting indifferently, and Shanks was laughing it off. Shortly after the observation, we landed on solid ground this time. Again, each of us had different results. Shanks landed exactly on his rump, already on a cross-legged sitting position. The tall man and I deftly landed on our 2 feet without issue. The Yassip guy landed face first into the ground, immediately standing up, pointing and shouting at me incoherently. I was still acting that the problem was a minor inconvenience. Since we reached our destination, I began looking at our surroundings. Aside from seeing a well-maintained house and a field of good quality crops, it looks like we met the giant and the girl from the tavern again, the 2 looking at us in unhidden surprise that the landshark was caused by us. Hi. Going back to my facade. Good to see you again. Giving out a very cheery tone which again got the stare from the giant, but it looks like the girl was more relaxed with our appearance as well. Yo Gigi-sama, Shanks shouted out, catching the attention of the giant. We've going out now. The giant merely huffed in relief while the girl shouted, come back soon Shanks-sama. The red-haired captain replying in a loud, definitely. So crewmate, I'll only ask of you 3 things once you become a pirate under my fold. Shanks said, turning to me next. 1 is that you become part of our nakama. You protect us, we protect you, and your fights are our fights now unless you specifically tell us it's personal. The first order bringing shock to me but quickly subsided, similar to me in Naruto Tem's line of thought. I mused in my mind. Once I nodded to him, he continued. 2. You are to stay your hand away from the blood of the innocent. We venture out for the sake of it and for the chance of glory, but not the corrupt way. Again, another similar ideal. Another nod. And 3, is that you are to attend and join in on drinking parties and celebrations enacted by us whenever you are able, understood? finishing his final order with a grin while I looked at him with a dumbfounded expression. Does that have to be a rule? I wondered, but nonetheless I nodded. How bad could it be? Little did I know that I would later regret those words. And little did I know I would set off a chain of events that would change the lives of nearly everyone in this world. What can we do? Shouted one of the admirals in the meeting. We want those two to pay for their crimes as much as you do, but we're not getting progress going on manhunts. Things were hectic in the Marine base as the refugees from the now burned down capital of Mariajoy were sent to the headquarters to find refuge. Most of those who survived were former slaves and general travelers or merchants passing through the city, but since most majority of the world nobles had been killed by the fish and the young slave, what's left of the glorious saints refused to claim any of the slaves in fear of the two monsters coming for retribution. Other than that, the nobles have become more paranoid to the outside world, keeping to themselves and engrossing themselves to politics in the world government more than to go outside flaunting their fake power. But they are giving us more financial support, pouring what was left of their rich resources to our banks, and anything that survived the Inferno in Mariajoy were free to take for the Marines. So those slaves were given a choice, whether to go into ships and return back to their homes, or find a new life, get a worker's job, or enlist as Marines. Understandably, most of them had chosen to go home with their families. The Marines' involvement of giving the Tenryubito supremacy was not our shining moment, as the world government granted them the holier-than-thou title so callously. Their riches are the only thing that we needed to help support our widespread influence on the world, as we cannot hold on to so many islands and create as many ships as the world thinks we could do. While the kingdom itself is more of a meeting for kings and the nobles than a symbol of the might of the world government than what most would believe, it would still take a toll on our resources, and we cannot just let go of a home advantage that had been wrested away from us. Though our main issue is on how to deal with the two. The first one, the fishman, who was known to be a powerful pirate captain, had blown down the gates of the kingdom and carved a path of death and destruction throughout the city, freeing slaves in his path, eliminating guards and nobles to and fro without issue. The second one was a young human, who reached the gallows that was on the other side of the kingdom in mere moments, killing guards and nobles with quick and merciless efficiency, releasing a large amount of trapped slaves, using a wide range of abilities that varied from immense speed, inhuman precision, very destructive firepower, and what seemed like summoning a large white wolf. Though both criminals are both guilty, the second one's unknown abilities makes him far more dangerous than a fishman. His abilities seem so impossible that it had to be obtained through use of devil fruits. His precision, speed and endurance had to be earned through a paramesha fruit that affects the physical capabilities of the person. While his large wolf companion must be earned through a zone fruit, allowing him transformation and communication with beasts. But his flame powers speak that he has eaten a Mara no Mi, a Logia fruit, that manipulates the elements. But it has been known that a devil fruit user can only eat one devil fruit, as the newly eaten fruit would replace the current devil fruit user's powers, but this child seems to have abilities that come from all types of devil fruit, a feat deemed only capable by gods. Not to mention the companion he had during his escape. That shadowy man, through the words of one world noble, was emanating an aura of pure malice, a desire of pure wanton destruction to anything that the man deemed scum, but was controlled by the younger man, even shared some form of resemblance between them, and shared a skill in the use of both the Logia and Paramesha fruit. Through some witnesses, it was also seen that the unknown man was also responsible for the destruction of the kingdom, he himself creating another inferno that engulfed the other half of Mariajoy. So we had a third suspect in this, so our decisions were tied up in who was more dangerous and needed to stop. A fishman who was the captain of a rather powerful pirate group whose powers and strength was already known. Knowing the situation from the former slaves, it seems that the fish pirate's agenda was to destroy the world nobles and their home to get back at them for enslaving him and his fellow mer people, so as long as we keep away from him and his people we wouldn't need to deal with him later. Increasing his bounty would be an expected response from us anyway, though we'll have to assign a team to monitor his actions so we know where he stands in the conflict between humans and fishmen. Until then, options like the Buster Call are blocked off from us. So that left the two unknown powerhouses whose locations were unknown, but no reports have cited on suspicious individuals going for the settlements or the ports. So that meant they would still be stuck here in the red line and are probably planning to find a way out of enemy territory. We needed to apprehend them, assess their strength, their morals and what threat they would pose to the people in general, but with their act of freeing the slaves they earned the respect of the people, and the honest men in the Marines meant that they would have many avenues of escape. We need to properly assess them to know of their intentions and threat to the world, considering their easy destruction of a large kingdom, so we needed a solution that would effectively any attempt of apprehending them would push their paths towards us. Expectingly we have set up bounties for both individuals, but we have crossed out one requirement. The alive option isn't necessary. This would prevent the populace from actively assisting the two, while we ordered our own men that they were to be incapacitated and sent to the Marine base. Though the bounty would garner the attention of more powerful pirates, if them hiding their powerful potential from the nobles and avoiding from our numerous Marine forces while accompanied by lieutenants and captains without a trace was evidence enough they would be capable of steering clear from the sea's powerful vagabonds, possibly even beat some of them. After ignoring a one-sided argument of a noble with one of our admirals, which our fellow man ignored, Garp, who had access to these meetings, called my attention, so Sengoku, catching the attention of some of the other admirals with his informality, so what's gonna be the epithet of the wolf brat? Bringing up the last task needed to be done. The nobles suggested both individuals be called the Twin Oni, or Godslayers, but their powers show no trace of ungodly forces and was too grand for the Marines' tastes, while Devil Sage would be too much of a compliment of their abilities than to warn of their deadliness, as well as the plan of preventing the information of their capability to use multiple devil fruit abilities to a deadly capacity would be faulted. After a long debate, with many researching back at the witness and survivor reports about their title, we have decided an epithet for the young former prisoner. His companion will have to be researched into more before we can come up with more information. Even his name would be a breakthrough. His title will properly acknowledge his wolf companion, his unnatural speed and ferocity, and his impressive aura of killing intent, a fitting name, to the point and no grandness or underestimation. Hokuro Seftis, the White Wolf of Death. It's been a long time, yet I never thought I'd grow to become so attached to this nakama. I silently thought as I lazily swayed on my hammock, which was dangerously attached to the bottom of the ship's crow's nest, watching the antics of the crew below. It had been a very long year during our adventure of the East Blue, and despite not having stayed here the longest, I have already developed an unbreakable camaraderie with the various crew on this ship. First off, to recap all the things that had happened in this year. A month after I joined this crew, I had revealed my identity to the rest of the crew, as Shanks had already known of my hidden identity. Luckily enough, the rest of the crew was perfectly fine with me, the newly titled White Wolf of Death, the man who had turned the holy city into soot in a minute. Once they had seen that Shanks was perfectly fine with me being part of the red-haired pirates and had begun celebrating my induction here. Though they kept naming me a super rookie the entire time, which was confusing, and now I remembered I hadn't asked them what it meant, but it wasn't an issue. And then the drinking party started. Kami helped me. Their home-brewed alcohol was nearly as strong as the special sake made by Lady Tsunade, except without all the staying half sober in the experience. Luckily nothing embarrassing happened. There were no missing gaps in my memory, just some singing, dancing, and me running around the ceiling. Though I do remember nearly all of us vomiting at the end, still not a thing I want to relive. I'd still prefer sake though. After that we continued to sail the East Blue on the Jack of Blades. At some point in the year, I had asked the ship's blacksmith for a favor. He gets a monthly pay of bellies and alcohol from me, and he gets me a substantial supply of materials so I could recreate the equipment I used to have before my previous life's death. Sadly, various metals and a forge couldn't help me with creating chakra scrolls and seals. I'll have to make do with the equipment a shinobi, even a samurai, is used to. I have forged multiple katas varying from Tonto's daggers to Nodashi's large, great swords. Add to that a steady supply of throwing weapons varying from shuriken, kunai, and sanbon, but I'll have to ask Yasup for some gunpowder to create some makeshift bombs in place for explosive tags. All of it currently neatly stowed on the crow's nest. I have been refining my kenjutsu on my free time. Since swordsmanship is the more commonly used style, and in this world, I'll have to strengthen mine to expect stronger foes. Some of it were spars with the swordsmen of the crew, while the rest were practicing my form and balance on the various high points on the ship, like the bow and the yards. Some of the swordsmen had also given me pointers about the sword styles that exist on this world, though I need not worry for the regular infantries that go for the straight sword or curved swords. though I have to watch for the more advanced swordsmen who use more advanced, even unorthodox weapons and styles, those elites who wield rapiers, longswords, even fellow kata users. They have also taught me further on the kata, sword styles they have here to add to my potential. Iaido seems reminiscent of the sword style the samurais of the Land of Iron, particularly the samurai general, Mifune. But this seems to focus on a more meditative art and likely to be used more by nobility. Though Iaijutsu is its predecessor, it's more close to the style the main army samurais of the Land of Iron use, more aggressive, more intent to kill. Practices involve the use of a real kata, but this style also focuses on fighting against groups as well as combating against an individual. Batojutsu branches so differently from the previous two styles, this one relying of unleashing multiple slashes on an individual, even a surrounding group instead of a one slash, one kill, and a proper return of the kata into its saya and its form, focusing on more standing positions than kneeling. They have also told me of how creating your own style of sword fighting was encouraged, as it gave a great advantage on the surprise factor and forcing enemies to open their defense more to try and analyze my style and adapt to it. Looks like I'll have to incorporate the new styles into the old style I had used back when I was an Anbu agent. Especially with these 2 6-shot gun blades I received from the world noble would be valuable as well. But back to the point at hand, as I was now a member of the pirate crew, they needed to find a role for me in the ship and were having a problem with it. I had no experience with guns or ships, so being a sniper or a shipwright was a no. They can't put me as a swordsman and a martial artist, as I was both an expert at both ken and taijutsu. I had basic level medical ninjutsu, so it isn't enough for me to heal graver injuries, but I seek to improve it in hopes to rival even the prowess of Tsunade's apprentice, so becoming the ship's doctor was a no for now. But I did inform them of my unparalleled eyesight and my ability to sense very faint scents even at a fairly far distance, so they found a very suitable position for me. Look out. Though the title doesn't sound so appealing, its perks did outweigh the ailments. You had a secure position on the crow's nest, and with that being your personal space, as you would have to stay for long periods of time up there, you could customize your space there, making it your own personal cabin. You only have to worry if a cannonball ever smashed through the mast that holds all your stuff. Interestingly, I have found myself to be very good in my role, as it seems that the tracking skills that the dog contracts has rubbed off on me, working alongside the ship's other lookout and navigator. Apart from looking for landmarks, I'm also adept at find very subtle changes in the environment and informing the navigator of them so he could properly discern whether a storm would appear or not, making ventures in the east blue more faster and safer. We generally had lesser issue with storms but weren't unprepared, and threats from pirates on the sea and bandits during leaves were substandard at best. Though one incident after a voyage was fairly interesting. A few months ago. Haha. Flashback in a flashback. Didn't expect that, did ya? So you managed to find him in a brawl with these marines? Yasip asked me as he pistol whipped a marine that was barreling towards him. Yes, but we should be expecting this from our illustrious leader by now. I answered sternly as Shanks whined about insubordination from his own crew as he lifted about 3 marines with one hand and threw them across the street. I have already grown used to occurrences like this, as fights seem to follow Shanks wherever he goes, and most of said fights starts at a drinking institute. Blocking multiple overhead swings from 5 marines, I easily push them off my guard and into the air, knocking them unconscious at the end of their fall. I've taken to only using lethal force when I was pushed to take opponents more seriously. And as much as I hate the world nobles for their arrogance and how this world's government were incompetent and ignorant of them, I still see the necessity of the Marines here as pirates, even though I'm one of them. Most are greedy and power-hungry, or just plain cruel and sadistic, and group of order is necessary to protect the civilization. This group just happens to have more corrupt, stuck-up, self-righteous higher-ups in the ranks. So I merely knocked out most of the Marines I faced, and killed the ones showing the most corruption or the most sadist. But back to our current situation, me, Usopp and Shanks are facing back to back, surrounded by Marines, effectively blocking our path from the port. Surrender, we have orders to take at least 2 of you alive. Demanded a lieutenant. Though strange as my wanted poster noted I was to be taken dead, but I can sense that he wants to subdue and capture me. But before any of us could act, a line of metal bars reminiscent of metal fences began shooting around us, surrounding us and the Marines. Reacting quickly, I grabbed the shoulders of my two friends and leapt for the roofs. My suspicion was found to be correct when the large, flexible metal conjoined to the center, binding anyone coming into contact with it. "Oops, looks like Hina missed," said a female voice out loud. "Who the hell says, oops, after missing a chance to subdue and ends up binding the rest of their allies?" Looking for the source of the attack, my eyes meet an unexpected individual with strange abilities. I see a tall, slim woman with long pinkish blonde hair flowing long unto her back and framing her face on both sides with two locks. She had a womanly figure with well-developed S, with her marine uniform not leaving much to the imagination, though apart from that the part that struck me the most was her eyes. Those dark brown orbs full of determination and conviction, with her belief in the Marines' rivals that of any shinobi's loyalty to their village, would make a splendid Marine with that level of dedication. Though the other factor was also incredibly strange as well, long metal bars that formed the binding fence were shot out of her arms, impossible to hide something of that size in the already small sleeves of the female Marine uniform, and were under complete control of the woman, using the metals as if it was in her nature. Was this a power that this world's devil fruit provide? Interesting to say the least, though the erring disadvantage of losing your abilities if you came into contact with water, and even losing the ability to swim and just sink like a rock in the sea, was a very capitalizing disadvantage to a world surrounded by water. "May I know thy name, my lady?" I asked the woman politely. The style of speech stuck due to serving under nobles, and I required at least something to spite them, as they thought of us as uneducated beasts. Other than that, it caused her to redden slightly under my noble voice and honest question despite the circumstances, as she unbinded her compatriots. "My name is Hina, a lieutenant of the Marines, and you are Hokuro de Seftis, correct?" she answered as she asked me of my identity. "Indeed, and I guess you came here to eliminate me, right?" Guessing from the slight shock in her eyes, which was replaced quickly with fake coldness, she was planning nothing of that caliber. "Yes, you can't just escape your punishment." Lying to everyone but me and Shanks, and began shooting metal bar restraints towards us. "An admirable quality you have," I complimented, which left her in surprise just enough for me to grab my companions once more and go for the road that reached the port. "Your great dedication shall make you a splendid captain, an admiral even." Saint Street, stop with all these praises. You are an enemy. Don't go complimenting your combatants out of the blue," she shouted back, as I also used my genuine compliments to give me opportune moments apart from giving my honest assessment of her. Giving her a smile, leaving her with an even redder blush before turning back to my captain and friend, I notified them, "Go for the ship." Nudging my head back to the now fully ready Marine group, "I'll hold them off till you get the ship ready." "You got these guys?" asked my friend Yasip, slightly worried at the odds against me. Giving him a ridiculous face, I replied, "I burnt down a large kingdom of stone in mere moments before easily hiding from their main force for months." Before giving a competitive smirk, "I think I can handle my own," assuring him of my skills. "Don't forget to buy your new girlfriend a gift though before you come back," mocked Shanks, ending the dramatic build-up, leaving me and Hina in a blushing, stuttering mess and flooring the other Marines and some civilians near us. "Go for the classic, a really big teddy bear." "Captain," I shouted out, "it wasn't my fault. I was naturally respectful to the opposite gender." Laughing on his way to the ship with Yasip cackling on the way, he continued, "And don't forget to use Protectio. Oh, for the love of Kami, stop. Seriously. I keep forgetting that Shanks can have a very mature sense of comedy apart from his childish mannerisms." After the two left, with me, some civilians, the still floored Marines, a similarly very red Hina now beside me in an atmosphere so silent you could hear a cricket at a distance. "Sue," mumbled Hina, "where do we go from this?" That was my captain. I acted as if we had just witnessed my father streaking around the city. After a silence that seemed to last for hours, I finally gave in and answered for my captain, "Sorry about that." Rubbing the back of my head as I sported a heavy blush, "My captain has a rather dirty sense of humor that only appears at certain times when I'm being respectful towards women." You understandable," mumbled out Hina. So some Marines in my division are very straightforward with Hina. Some even try to go for her, but Hina always fights them off. Nodding my head in approval of her skill. "Good," I complimented, and before I could say any more, something caught my interest. A large trail of smoke was moving around the rooftops, but from further observation it was a literal trail of smoke heading for Hina and I's location. About to go forward to confront it, Hina extended her arm to stop me and the look in her eyes said trust her instincts this time. That and if I'd continue, I'd suspect she would have an easier time shooting restraints at me. Agreeing for now, we wait till the trail of smoke traveled straight for us and stopped right in front of Hina, finally revealing its true form. A tall, rather muscular man in marine uniform, white-haired buzz cut and smoking a cigar was standing imposingly in front of Hina. Normally I'd be naturally affected if someone was acting rather negatively to a woman due to my history, but Hina seems rather calm about this and is familiar with the marine. Hina, why didn't you tell me the target was in the city? Demanded the taller man at her after glaring at me for a moment, voice gruff and tough despite his looks making him look a few years older than me. You were lazing about again and I didn't have much time to wake you when the superiors were shouting at us to get to him, and arriving there later than the others would have gotten us both in big trouble, replied Misa easily before turning to me. We don't have much time, but do come with us so we can explain more about the situation, seeing as how you realized that we weren't out to kill you. Looks like my suspicions were right and I could read well that she meant no ill will, so I complied. Oh, and can you help us get our colleges and superior off the ground to the doctor? We can't just leave them here. Nodding once more, I motioned for them to wait as I formed a cross-shaped seal with my hands. Shadow clone technique, and with that about 5 more clones of mine appeared and I had set them off to work, surprising both Smoker and Hina greatly. Sighing slightly to myself as this explanation might come from both me and the Marine's side. This was gonna be a long day, I thought to myself before I motioned for both Marines to continue on their way. Flashback in a flashback end. Asterisk. It seemed that the dead bounty on my head was more of a precaution than an actual sign of threat, and rather large bounty prices were common for powerful criminals or pirates. And now I finally know why most of the crew were titling me a super rookie. And it also seems that the organization as a whole isn't generally a bad influence, rather is being manipulated by corrupt agents and higher-ups in the government to go far from their original goal into a mostly self-righteous group that is forced to follow the whims of politicians than focus on their goal of protecting the innocent just for the sake of it. That and they recognized me as an unknown threat and needed to know where I stand in this world. Good thing we left with calmer minds as I explained that I had no problem with their organization and rather thought it was necessary, though I refused to explain the origin and further capabilities of my abilities, and I assured them that they need not worry about it, hinting that only the corrupt shall suffer my wrath. And after getting to know Hina and Smoker more was great to ease tensions. Though I respect Smoker's own version of justice and idea of what pirates are, I advised him still not to be so blinded to the point of arrogance. I like to think that after a few fair bouts with him, he put that into consideration. The problem is that now the entire crew, particularly Yassip and Shanks, now have ammunition to bombard me of my so-called affair with the Marine Lieutenant Hina, considering they had heard no fights occurring in the city and with Shanks hinting at something between me and her. It doesn't help that she also gave me a Den Den Mushi transponder snail to contact her again. Not that I didn't want to talk to her again, just that the rest of the guys are being more obnoxious about it. Apart from that, less Marines are being sent to hunt us and we have some leeway when we enter cities under Marine protection so long as I keep doing jobs for them, sniffing out the corrupt, and if necessary or the target is out of Marine hands, eliminate with extreme prejudice. I had to speak with Shanks and Beckman about this, as I can't just hide such sensitive information about me being in league with Marines. Luckily they were neutral on the matter and were rather accepting of me forming an alliance with them, saying that tensions were already high due to high number of Morganiers and the perks they received weren't so bad as well. Sadly that was the words of Beckman. Shanks has understood the entire thing, but has decided to reply via mocking me once more as a chance for me to get more close with Hina. Cammy. He's not gonna let that go as he. But that was along with the working with the Marines issue a problem that we'll overcome, though I ain't gonna make my relationship with Hina a competition. Peace mains are neutral with the Marines to begin with and we had more other things to look forward to. Shanks says we're gonna take a much longer break at the destination we're gonna be arriving in, namely Dawn Island of the Goa Kingdom, go up to a town, get temporary residence and party to our heart's content. That and we've caught such a great bounty, a devil fruit, which we nicknamed the Gomu Gomu no Mi due to its elastic properties. With easy resting and such a miracle of a treasure, how could our situation go any worse? Guess things didn't really go as well after that. I pondered in my head as I dangled from my hammock on the highest branches of the tree I'm currently resting on, recollecting the events that led up to where I am now. Truth be told, I expected something silly to happen due to the knowing the crew I was with on a personal level, but I never really anticipated much. As expected, the people weren't fond of us at first, even thought it was a raiding party at best. Their attitude to us brought be history of aggression. Though we couldn't blame them, most pirates sail the seas as Morganeers, so we held nothing against them. After proving we held no ill will against them, they held us at a mild distrust, but was smart enough to know the difference between a good pirate and a bad one. That, and they weren't one to pass up the increasing their alcohol prices, a good business sense, which even us peacemanes could respect. After months of settling down on Fushia village, which was close to the sea and had its own port, the locals have grown rather fond of us, our unexpected joyous and silly attitudes, something they never though they could see in the normally vagabonds of the sea. They still haven't dropped their alcohol prices, considering we stayed in the tavern or inns most of the time. Other than that, it seems Fushia Island has become our own home and could call its residents family, a thing we didn't expect to happen but wasn't an unwanted factor. This should be a clear sign that relations can be repaired despite the history of hate with people with a history of bad blood. Which means there is a slight chance that the heated conflict between pirates and marines can be repaired. But along with the peaceful coexistence with the villagers, another surprise jumped up our lap. Weeks earlier, I can say one phrase this more than the number of people I've beat down in my lifetime: Luffy, you are an idiot. What were you thinking when you decided to shove that dagger on your cheek? I reprimanded worryingly as I coated my hand with green chakra to heal his wounds. While the crew were generally partying once his wound were starting to heal and celebrated Luffy's idiocy. Though one particular civilian, Makino, the bartender of the tavern and Luffy's adoptive mother, was very worried and was constantly over my shoulder as I did what I could. It had been a long time since the destruction of Mariajoy, but I made a decision not to over-specialize in kenjutsu, practicing more in my weaker aspects, namely medical ninjutsu and genjutsu. One, to make up the weakness of the crew doctor not able to be everywhere our crew is, and two, since the loss of a factor, given to me, that made learning jutsu and memorizing the steps easier. I like to humble myself that I am slightly below Shizune on the levels of healing, but I have yet to, possible even impossible, to catch up with the slug sage and her apprentice in the terms of pure magnitude, innovative healing ideas that stretch even farther from just the mystic palm technique and how to manipulate chakra to augment my physical abilities. Besides, the strength of 100 seal is out of my reach anyways. Though the chakra scalpel technique medic nin weaponized and in particular Kabuto Yakushi mastered in was intriguing. That aside, looks like the wood will heal and luckily leave no scars, which was thankful. Don't worry, Luffy prided once I signaled I was done with my work, it didn't hurt at all the while failing to prevent tears from flowing from his eyes due to the still apparent stinging. Shanks shouted at Luffy to reprimand him for his brashness, but most tuned him out when he got so overworked on certain things. I'm not afraid of pain at all, Luffy proclaimed, his sudden surge of happiness dulling the pain, so next time you should bring me with you. Bringing the group into a joyous occasion once more. Sighing and finally chuckling at the antics of the crew, I walked to the bar and rested on one of the stools, arms rested on the table, continuing on my mind pondering about this world and how my shinobi companions are faring. This world is lucky, people are not separated due to hate, no major war caused voids of hate to flow in nearly everyone and a cycle of hate thrived. Wondering how my shinobi friends would have changed if they lived in this world, heck even put villains like Danzo, Obito, Madara, hell even Orochimaru in the same situation, might have prevented them from growing corrupted or broken. Though Guy, Lee and Naruto would have thrived in an environment like this, and Jiraiya would always be a super pervert wherever he goes. I mused in my head as I chuckled at the thought of the youthful duo celebrating with Shanks' crew and not be looked at in embarrassment, and Jiraiya being kicked out of bathing houses by women in this world. Unfortunately, my mind went on a darker path as I thought of the close people I unwillingly and unintentionally left behind. My brat of a squad, Gaara, Naruto, Sakura, Hinata, and so many others that I can barely have the time to name. I depressingly thought in my head as I have yet to find a chance to return home. Shizune, my thoughts and loneliness betraying me to the clutches of my dark side. I sensed a slight vibration on the table in front of me. Looking up I see the bartender Makino placing a mug of alcohol in front of me, miraculously and unknowingly saving me out of my thoughts. A bright and thankful smile on her face. She had been the kindest person they have met in this village, being very polite and generous with them, always having an open door for us and even giving us a discount in the alcohol served in her tavern. I still paid back the full price of all the drinks the crew drank and helped clean up when the rest have went back to their own lodgings in the ship ahead of me. Casually talking led to one thing and another, and now we were in a slow and easy relationship, dating a few times, but I didn't feel like going further as I didn't want her to be in love with someone who had a violent history and was always away with a chance of death in his adventures. So I kept thinking we were just dating as friends. Shanks told me you preferred sake over the other drinks. Nodding at her informed fact about me and also thankful for the drink, I accept the mug and downed the drink in one go and sighing in relief, giving her a thankful smile in her way. Sitting next to me and thankfully, on my side where she was not in sight of Shanks from where he's sitting due to me being visual obstacle. We sat there of a moment, somehow enjoying the calm silence that was around just the two of us despite the noisy and rousy mess around us. Thank you for healing his wounds, Hokuro-san. She broke the silence between us, and thankfully the idiots, still my idiots, were preoccupied with their celebration to hear her. The doctor here would have patched Luffy's wound up but would have left a scar, yet you stepped in to help when it wasn't your problem. Shaking my head at her idea of what my intentions, I explained, I don't really care for anything. She looked at me with shock, which I quickly remedied. I see a person, I help them, I don't care for the who. And I don't really have or need a why. To explain helping people, making her kind smile, which I don't know why I shied away from. Besides, the brat somehow wormed his way into my nakama. Now I've gotta take care of the blunderings of my little brother as is my responsibility, right? Earning bright smiles from both of us. Though the moment between us and the celebrations around us were halted when the door to the tavern was slammed wide open. A group of thugs walked into the room, wearing the same rugged uniform and headbands, their weapons shone clear as day. But one person in the gang was prominent out of all of them. So these are pirates, gloated the person who I theorized to be the leader. They don't look like much to me. I'm already planning on multiple ways on killing this man as I recognize this lowlife's face from the wanted poster in the town hall. Apart from that, one thing was also clear for me and the crew. The glare sent by Shanks to us, sending the clear message to not fight. Damn it, this Thames below our time, but I'm not just gonna let him insult our pride. The rest of his insults were filtered out by the crew, but the civilians like Luffy and Makino weren't used to things like this. One was seeing someone insult her great friends. Another was seeing someone shame his heroes. After the bandit leader's pathetic attempts at making a threat at Shanks' life were also ignored, and we just continued on our merry way once the wastes left the area. Though Luffy and Makino weren't taking this well, the bartender was worriedly asking if Shanks was alright, while Luffy felt betrayed due to the inaction of me and the crew and made for the door. Shanks reached out, grabbing Luffy's arm, trying to cheer him up that it wasn't something to kick up a fuss for. But what happened next was shocking for the tavern's occupants for two different reasons. One, because of the strange phenomenon. Two, that something just went wrong, very very wrong. As Luffy continued on his way to the door, uninhibited or halted by Shanks' hold on his arm. Luffy's arm literally stretched from his position back to Shanks' spot where he was still holding the kid's hand. Lucky and I rushed over to the exceptionally hidden spot where we hid in the small chest. The safest spot we planned for days to keep secure, had most of the crew stationed there on a daily basis to keep it secret and had various locks on it, most stowed away on the most trusted crew to make sure its contents were safe. And there it was, shamelessly open for all to see, the guards themselves shocked at its condition that they never noticed, and its contents currently inside the stomach of one slippery brat. I didn't know what happened next. Lucky was rushing over to the rest of the group while Makino was worriedly fawning over my currently flat on the floor form with tears flowing from my eyes. Why did I have to go and jinx us? I depressingly thought in my mind as I feared how we would deal with this now. Days after the elastic brat incident, Well, at least he's taking this better than any of us could expect. I thought to myself aloud as I evaluated Luffy's training result while the kid himself was going back to the village. Shrugging at the kid's naturally cheery attitude, I walked out of the training field I created to the tree home I made myself outside of town. He saw most of the crew as his heroes, but he seems to be at an impasse due to yesterday and with what to think of me, since I was also a member of Shanks' crew, so had just called me Aniki, or Big Brother, till he can make up his mind. With nothing that can be done since the Gomu Gomu powers have already transferred into Luffy, we decided to at least train the kid in what his powers would give him almost supernatural affinity with. It's only been a few days since the incident, but since I'm adopting half of the pervy sage's training regime, sadism and Guy-sama's determination, Luffy's doing well with close combat, and is learning to use his powers to catch opponents out of guard and to hit them in angles they normally wouldn't expect. Swords and anything involved with pointy objects is a big no to avoid, as his powers put him in a deadly disadvantage against those. Luckily he's doing well with the external art of the strong fist style, aiming to improve his body and physical prowess, and once he's done with that, I'm teaching him the hard art of the strong fist style that allows him to meet and counter an opponent's incoming force with an equal and/or overwhelming force. Though it would be interesting that once he got older to teach him the drunken fist style that Guy and Lee excelled at, since his already flowy and free-moving body doesn't need the use of alcohol to administer the effects needed to perform the style, which means no time limit as to how long the style can be used and none of the effects of alcohol weakening him, so only his physical prowess needs to be improved before I teach him that. But before I could ponder more on what to do, I sense my alarm seals alerted me that someone had entered the area, in particular the training field, a female civilian, feeling distressed. Flickering back over to the field, I see that it was Makino, and her face could say it all. Something was wrong. It's Luffy. Her voice ragged and tired as it seemed like she was running in water the entire time, her normally cheery, beautiful face struck by fear and sadness. Bandits. My eyes nearly bulge out as I knew full well what she was referring to, before quickly catching her from falling due to fainting. So they didn't leave the town. I thought gravely and joyfully in my head, one fearing what they would have done to him and two at the idea of cashing in the bounty while making that bandit leader regret that he even looked at the crew to begin with. I'll protect him, I promised her, pushing out the dark thoughts in my head, her trust in me to protect the kid giving me more considerable strength. Summoning a shadow clone to help Makino back to the tree house to properly rest while I rushed back to the village. My speed meant I would arrive in a few seconds, large Nodashi sword in hand, as I prayed that Luffy was still alright until then. No POV third person, location, village center. I won't let you get away with this. Luffy screamed at the top of my lungs as he struggled against the rope that restrained him from his chest to ankles. And what are you gonna do, brat? Mocked the smug bandit leader, a black eye prominent on his face. Bite me. Before laughing his ass off, acting almighty when his opponent can't do anything but be scared as shit when a kid managed to nail him good in the eye. To be honest, the rest of the bandits are shit compared to Aniki's strength. His highly demanding training put me in better shape than my previous self, now my punch is as strong as a cannon's. The Luffy thought in his mind, ignoring the stupidity above him. Too bad they got the jump on me when they surrounded and overwhelmed me. He thought frankly as he felt cuts all over his body as any blunt attacks had no hold on his state, but the post prominent was the wound on his left cheek, a old wound reopened and was being smudged on the dirt ground, all other wounds on his body palling in comparison. We'll be taking all the money and women in this village, no one can interfere. Demanded the leader to the village elder and the people, his men easily threatening them from saving the young kid, before pulling out a flintlock pistol. And if you don't comply, aiming the pistol directly at Luffy's head, this is what'll happen. Shanks, Aniki, please save my family. Luffy pleaded in my mind as he let loose a waterfall of tears while he flashed the brightest smile. The thought of death never fazed him, but the other threat of the people he considered his nakama losing everything was weighing too heavily in his mind. But before the leader could pull the trigger, shunk, glish. A scream emanated from the leader's gaping mouth, causing his lackeys to look back in surprise as to what happened and giving the villages ample space to see what occurred. The sight before them shocked them to gaping faces, while the bandits whimpered in fear. To Luffy's side, A man holding a very large sword had sliced off the leader's left arm. Blood was gushing from the bandit's stump of an arm as he stumbled back clumsily, shouting madly at the bloody stump. The Nodashi-wielding man holding his blade executioner style, the blade nearly going for the restrained kid's neck. "You all right, brat?" the monk's voice asked rather rudely, but after just a few days of training with a certain person made Luffy easily recognize the slightly sadistic voice. "Aniki," Luffy shouted cheerfully at him, despite his blade still dangerously close to the back of his neck. "You made it to the fight, I was about to kick their asses." He prided to him as Hokuro titled his blade for his next slashing move to cut off the rope that restrained him. "Trying to beat them with all out limbs tied up. Don't kid yourself, kid," he shot back, stabbing the blade to the ground, picking me up and dusting me off before giving him a hug. "What did I tell you about rushing into fights on your own?" His tone now more worried and shocked. "But they started it." Pointing back at the group of bandits, now completely hysterical that the kid had just returned the sordid man's attention towards them, they were gonna raid this village and take all the women and money. They were now even more scared as he revealed their intentions to this place. "Oh really?" Hokuro questioned darkly, standing up fully once more, returning his grip to the large sword. "Shame my crew's pride, mock us and treat us like dirt all you like, but," he started before everyone noticed another group standing beside the young man and the child. "I'll never forgive anyone who messes with my friends," finished Shanks with the rest of his crew in tow, his tone full of anger which the villagers never thought to see in one of the Geoise crew, less especially the captain. Both Hokuro and Shanks were emanating two different auras from themselves. Shanks had a pale gray aura surrounding him, seemingly negating all the color the world around him had without affecting himself. Hokuro had a pure white aura surrounding him, but it was clinging to him like he was on fire, red flames promenading over his own eyes. The villagers were unaffected by its effects, but we still felt uneasy around them, but the crew seemed completely used to this. The bandits were nothing but terrified. "Don't come any closer," shouted one of the bandits, pointing his pistol at the duo. "I'm bored already, Captain, I'm leaving the rest to you," Hokuro said to Shanks, who merely nodded slightly, not even taking his eyes away from the bandits, but the young blade wielder wasn't done yet as he turned to the bandit who was holding the pistol. "1. You don't use those to just threaten," he pointed out before out of nowhere Lucky was right beside the said bandit, shooting his pistol to the side of the bandit's head, flinging the now dead bandit away from the fat pirate's position due to the force. The civilians were shocked at the violence and death but weren't saddened by it, while the pirates were pulled from their fear due to the Hokuru's mentioning of him not participating in the fight and the death of one of their comrades. "And no, now you've done it, you bastards," one of them shouted out. "That was dirty." The others looking at them with incredulous looks at their contradiction. 2. We're pirates, Shanks corrected, which was finished by Beckman. "We're not saints." It was then that the villagers witnessed the greatest beat down they've ever seen. For civilians and land huggers, that is. Shanks' first mate Beckman never needed to fire a single shot and used his musket as a club to defeat all the rushing bandits. While the bandit leader was sitting where he was, his body gone numb to the blinding pain, and was now fully attentive of what was happening to his men and looking at us in fear. But he still found the commendable will to stand up and throw down a smoke bomb to escape. Seeing that he had escaped was shocking for the crew and the villagers, but Hokuro didn't really care. He wasn't worth being dealt with silent killing in that moment anyway. He thought coldly before deciding that he had other things to deal with. "I'll be going now," states Hokuro, who had picked Luffy up carefully and moved out to the village's clinic to proper treatment to heal his wounds. Though he did leave the bandit a surprise when the bandit made his escape to the sea. A half hour later, a scream came from the direction of the sea, and some of the locals were sure they saw the Lord of the Coast swallow up a small boat that had a one-armed man on it. While there were little doubts at who the poor victim was, they were not remorseful about it. But even then, Shanks' crew had already gone to partying in the tavern, turning the people's uneasiness to annoyance at the crew's idiocy, which was bolstered to justified arrogance when Hokuro had paid the village leader a large amount of bellies for the damages to the town and the forgotten pay for the emptied supply of sake days ago and the quickly draining sake supply due to the current party. "Those guys are gonna empty my share soon enough," groaned Hokuro as he left the clinic, finished healing Luffy, but the wound on his cheek would definitely leave a scar now, while equally distraught at the thought of working for his money once more. Well, I could always use shadow clones to do multiple jobs anyway. Hokuro compensated in my mind as he thought more on what had just happened on the week alone. I wonder what's gonna happen next, he pondered to myself as he went back to my treehouse, intent on finding out why his clone has yet to disperse. Omake. While the master rushed back to town, the clone had taken Makino to the treehouse, while annoyed that he was left out of a fight, still took care of the woman as the master seems to have close and caring relationship with her. Entering the surprisingly large and complex tree house structure and placing her at one of the guest room's bed, he sat at a nearby wooden chair to watch over her and waited till she regained consciousness. He was short of annoyed that the master had left out some details in what was happening and who this woman was, off to crush some scum. Protect this woman, was the only thing the master said before he left for the nearby village. But before he could think on it further, he was roused from his mental rant when the woman had been rolling, turning and grumbling in her rest, something in her mind obviously bothering her. Though he was annoyed with the master, he was still part of the original and he could not just stay there with the woman being in such stress, and also shared a level of concern and care for the woman. Taking her hand in his and humming a soothing tone to relax the resting woman. This seemed to have an effect on her as her scrunched up face had eased up and her beautiful face had earned more serenity and grace. I wouldn't doubt if master had felt attraction to her. Chuckling to himself as he studied the woman's peaceful rest, now wondering if the master and this woman was in a relationship. But his thoughts were once interrupted by the woman suddenly sitting up shouting, "Luffy!" Looking very worried that she was in a completely unknown place. Quick to ease her shock, the clone went up to her and placed his hand on her shoulder, earning a shocked reaction from her and a slightly worried and guilty look from him seeing her get surprised. "Hokuro-san, why are we here? Ah, so she thinks I'm the original, well, time for some payback." The clone thought mischievously as he intended to answer her worries. "You fainted when you came to the training field. I got you here to my house before I went back to the village." Using the knowledge I had from the quick orders of his master to connect the dots. "Are the villagers fine?" Makino asked quickly. "Is Luffy all right?" Not giving him enough time to answer both. Chuckling slightly at her over-worrying, which he could clearly as a very thoughtful and caring personality, after snickering at her pouting face, he answered confidently. Of course. While he didn't know that, he knew full well that the master was very, very powerful. If bandits were the only thing that he was dealing with, then there was nothing to worry about. "I'm surprised at your lack of faith on me," he continued with a mock sadness, betting his life that he was correct with his master's familiarity with the woman. Blushing embarrassingly, Makino quickly answered, "Ah. No. Not really noticing the clone's joke. It's just that I'm really worried for my nakama, but I knew you'd save them," looking up at him with thankful and admiring eyes. "That's it. Master must be blind if he doesn't feel an attraction to this pretty woman," he thought nonchalantly in my head as he was now confident that the master's care and concern for her must mean something more. "Why don't you rest here for now?" he suggested, bringing up a surprised face from the woman, which was quickly remedied. "This is just a guest room, and it looks like you still need to rest as you were very tired when you came to me," calming her a bit, but the slight blush on her face never lifted. All right then," she conceded, as the only reason she sat up so quickly was because of the adrenaline from waking up from her nightmare, but her body was still strained for running so fast. Smiling at her sincerely, "Get some rest," the clone said before making his way out of the room to dispel, as he lost the want to prank the master as he didn't want to manipulate the woman. "Ah, wait," Makino shouted at him, stopping him just at the door. Looking back at her confusingly, she continued, "Can you stay here with me?" Earning a surprised look and blush from the clone himself. He must be in a relationship with her. The clone thought confidently as he went back to a seat nearby the bed. "Don't worry, I'll stay here," assuring her as he made to sit nearby her, but it looked like she wasn't having that. Though straining herself, she pulled the clone into the bed beside. Wait," the clone said frantically. We shouldn't be doing this. I thought I was the one to take charge in pranking the master." Silencing him with a deathly glare rivaling Tsunade's, she rested her head on his chest. "Stop trying to push me away," she pleaded suddenly, pulling the clone out of his shock. "I can handle you not being here most of the time. you traveling your life on the seas, but I want to be more than just friends. Suddenly becoming very sad. Seemingly giving up trying to make sense of what had happened between the woman and the master, the clone sighed before wrapping his arms around her, seemingly cheering her up considerably as she slept serenely holding him. Master is so going to kill me, the clone thought gravely to myself as he knew full well that he was but a fraction of the original, so he wouldn't stand a chance. That was before an idea had gone into his head and he had set a devious plan for the master. Minutes later, what the whispered voice of Hokuro could say as when he went up to the guest room before his body was switched with the clone. Looking beside him was the beauty Makino, who was resting her head on his chest and her arms wrapped tightly around his body, not willing to let go. He could only glare at his clone, who had a mirthful look in his face at the trickery his own clone pulled off on him. Before the clone dispelled himself, sending all the information it learned directly unto Hokuru's memories. What he experienced shocked him and opened his eyes in a way to how Makino felt about him. Looking back at the sleeping beauty, he sighed before he let himself fall to sleep, his arms around her as well. This is gonna be an interesting life. Hokuro though solemnly to myself as he let the bliss of sleep take over. Thankfully one of them felt very serene and thankful at the lack of nightmares due to the guardian angel watching over her sleep. Said fool had changed drastically, now sporting a pure white spiky hair instead of a midnight black, ditching the crimson shinobi battle armor for a full-bodied black garment with black pants, gloves and boots, over which wore a white robe that adorned 6 magmata markings across his chest pattern and covered his sleeve cuffs and the rims of his robe, and a black rinnegan and 9 black magatama markings in rows of 3 on his back. Sporting shining horn protrusions that slightly resembled a forehead protector with an upward curve on the right temple, his eyes a light purple with ripples covering the entire eye, skin a near pale gray. Useless, the fool mocked, before being surrounded by a sphere of concentrated raging fire that would leave nothing but soot. To appear in front me and striking me back far with a backhand, launching me to the edge of the mountain arena. Damn, I cursed. My stamina and chakra reserves were on the point of shattering after pushing nearly all I had, using Susanoo to its nth mobile degree to cut down the meteors summoned by Shichibukai Tensai in place of a vengeful fool so he wouldn't waste much energy. I can't read his moves, I noted of the grand-robed fool, coughing up blood as my body was becoming incredibly strained. The others weren't faring well, even with the fool's shadows confronting a blonde sage's shadow clones. The main fool was someone out of my reach. One of my companions, spiked black hair, duck butt included, went for a killing blow with his lightning-enhanced sword along with a hulking wraith above him, joining in dishing out death, only to be pushed back by a weak Shinra Tensai with heavy influence from an invisible force which the duckbutt fool claimed to be only seen by his special eye. A blonde teen attempted a similar assault, but ended up with the same result. Why can't you just all die as a team? You hold everyone back from attaining eternal peace. Flaunted the fool, seeing as how me and the other 4 were still holding on. Your peace is a lie, everyone is subjugated and unable to live free lives with your plan. Shouted out a blonde brat, remaining utterly defiant even at overwhelming opposition. Like you have even a chance of ever stopping me, 2 brats that think so highly of themselves, a envious third teammate that can only be a shadow compared to them, and 2 senseis stuck in the past and surpassed by their students, pathetic, before disappearing from our sight. What happened next was a complete blur to me. 4 pairs of arms seemed to grab and constrict my limbs, preventing me from moving before a force made a jab straight through my chest. Hokuro, 2 of my companions shouted in dismay, shocking the others but the opposing force. You could have been a great man, bringing the world eternal peace with me, grumbled a fool in front of me, fist stuck in my chest, my will to resist the illusion and life fading. But I will not deny you from attaining a semblance of the true peace. Open your mind to the infinite Tsukiyomi. My will and thoughts being taken away, but I wouldn't end this way. SSC Ru, you, and your lies. Looks like I'll be seeing Akari soon. I mumbled weakly, retching out a liter blood before my both eyes flooded with blood, my rage aimed right at the fool in front of me. Amaterasu Omikami. And with that, my consciousness faded, leaving behind a eternally raging flame in form of a majestic woman engulfing the arrogant fool and I, significantly more potent and grand white flames than the eternally dark ones expert users of the dojutsu technique will ever attain, incapable to be put out, be one of my companions who I don't fully trust anymore, and the fool who was now unable to defuse them from thinking these eyes would be inferior. If it didn't kill or harm him, at least it would be annoying him if for a while. And then I dreamed a fading fantasy, where Tucson and Kachin never died, my Otudo never needed to wear that mask physically and emotionally, and my Imoudo never died to my foolishness. While I enjoyed a false time with my loved one with her mentor's pet pig and a cheerful, active brat both of us prided in. Flashback end. Waking up with great shock, I panted heavily as adrenaline rushed throughout my body, moving out of the bed and moving to calm myself. I had been dreaming more and more about my old world, and how my dreams always pointed out my defeats, my losses and pains. I don't know whether or not this was me slowly starting to consider the chance that I could never return home, or it was clashing within me with another side that wished to stay. Slowly and slowly my hopes, no matter how hard I try to hang on, is slowly fading no matter what I do. I can't seem to stop and think that I'm gonna be in one hell of a ride sometime in the future, I thought solemnly as I stared out the open window, watching the moonlit shore and the majestic blue flowing without a care in the world. Though to be frank, I shouldn't really be surprised when something completely pops out of nowhere, as crew had told me their adventures in the Grand Line and I was witness to the unknown but completely varied talents of the devil fruits was evidence enough for the lack of a stable reality in this world. Though the shinobi world does contain tailed beasts, keke genkai and jutsus that warp the elements and the fabric's reality, so I should be taking this in stride. I wonder if I'm gonna meet the legends Shanks likes to talk about, like Whitebeard, Mihawk and Sengoku. Listing off to myself the pirates and marines Shanks had met and or fought with in his adventures, him prating each and every one of their strength. After the incident we decided to dub the Romance Dawn. The bandit leader's insolence was the last straw for Shanks and I. Luffy's family have been screwing around for far too long, and the attempt on the villagers and Luffy's lives were just one of many acts that could have been prevented if the Marines had better control with their own operations. We had no way of contacting Dragon, and he would be certainly the last on our list, as he'd probably bring the kid into hiding with his group and push him to actively opposing the world government. That, and both of us knew for a fact that even if we couldn't contact the revolution leader, he had his own people listening and watching our every move. So Garp was our only choice on dealing on the matter, and things did not go out so smoothly. While he was grateful that we had protected the village and his grandson, he was less than when he had assumed we pushed Luffy to becoming a pirate during our stay. So we were given conditions so that he would come and deal with this. 1. That the Red Hair pirates were to leave by the end of the year before he will arrive. And 2. With my current position on the fate of what will happen between the pirates and marines, I was given the offer to join the Royal Shichibukai, and swear fealty to the Geoise. This was a bad position to be in for someone like me. The world nobles hate me for my actions, the Marines, most of them, want a piece of me after the debacle that used to be called the Glorious Kingdom, Mariajoy, in the event before that, which ended with numerous dead and heavily injured Marines and an injured Vice Admiral that earned my old title of Monster Slave. And even more likely, the rumored and failures in hiding their presence to me, Cypher Pole, would probably like to examine me for my abilities that speak near impossibility of wielding the skills of all 3 types of devil fruits. But it looks like Garp himself had that covered and had planned another identity for me in a fake history of a high-rising vagabond, honored the title Shichibukai. So it was either I join, or Garp goes off and deliberately worsens the already unstable relationship the pirates and Marines have. So I had to swallow the bitter pill dry and accept Garp's demands, as there was no other way. No matter how I felt this would bite me in some point, I have more than one experience that no one should be denied time with their family, especially if said family lived professions where they were on opposing sides and each journey or fight could possibly be their last. But it seemed like another complication arose from the shadows to strike where it hurts. Weeks ago, you planned to leave for the New World. I stoically questioned my crew's captain and first mate, and I knew full well that I would not like what they would say next. Yes, but since you are going to become a Shichibukai, you are somewhat tied to staying here, deciding whether or not to follow the world government's orders at times. Shanks started. And even though you are powerful in your own right, you would be outmatched in time by the enemy that waits in the New World. Beckman reasoned. But where would a pirate with no crew go? No ship, You know full well that Garp wants all of the red hair pirates to leave the Goa kingdom before he arrives. I challenge the idea. A man ripped away from his nakama was not a man at all, not one worth of being looked at. Which is why I am giving you one last order before we will meet again. Shanks eased with a slightly shaky voice under a determined face. He didn't want this to happen either, but that was the only path we saw before us and the only thing we could do was to walk forward. Let's just say I walked away from the ship, determined and thankful of the entire nakama seeing me off. And I would see my captain's duty fulfilled. Hokuro would hide in the shadows, only revealing himself to his close ones, while I will take up a new name that will be uttered in everyone's mouths in awe and fear, the shining star that would become the talk of fearful enemies. Luckily I didn't leave my stuff up the crow's nest again. Back to present. Hokuro-san, a rather serene but drowsy voice asked from the other side of the room. Looking back, my eyes meet a scantily clad woman looking back at me sleepily from the bed for two. The white blanket shone brightly in the moonlight, showing through its sheets her slender and curved form. It had been long since I learned of her wish to be more than just friends between us, though my heart yearned for another. The one I longed for would want me to move on, similar to how I would want her to do the same, especially since I essentially died in the shinobi world. After developing a close trust and relationship with her, I had revealed my past to her, my previous position as a slave and especially my old life as a shinobi. Frankly, she wasn't shocked of my past as a slave as she had seen my mark before but hadn't confronted me about it and waiting till I trusted her with this conflicting information, which I was thankful for. Though she was surprised at the reason as to how I had such inhuman abilities and a completely unrecognized style, doctrine and line of thought, though she did want one thing. Seeing as she was frankly unable to do anything in defending her home, only able to come to me for aid and fainting from exhaustion then. And since sooner or later I would need to return to adventuring the seas, the village needed to be able to defend itself from raiders, especially when Shanks and his crew and I were absent. Now disbelieving of the government's reliability, evident with the roaming bandits and the burning of the Grey Terminal. So I am train a proper militia in this town to allow a proper defense against malicious forces. Better than being forced to become a shichibukai. Makino-chan, I replied to her quietly and affectionately as I walked back to the bed to sit by her side. Go back to sleep, it's nothing. But she always knew when I was thinking things over for too long again. No, she demanded this time, pushing the feeling of drowsiness away. What are thinking about now? I'm just wondering of how Luffy's feeling right now. Drawing the topic away from my past and into another important issue. And rightfully so, with his closeness to the crew strengthened after the incident. He essentially felt the same thing I had, the difference being that only I was capable of holding back the pain. But he came out of it more determined and more convicted on his dream, straw hat standing strong against the wind, him set on returning it to its previous wearer once he was ready. One moment I was most proud of was that he denied the chance to know how important the straw hat really was. All Luffy wanted to know was that it was important enough for him to protect the gift with his life. You're worried for him. And you know how he reacted once he got his devil fruit powers, only to find a reason in it to be cheery and happy again. Stated the raven-haired beauty before continuing, he'll do fine where he is. You do know Garp put his grandson in the hands of bandits, right? That was the greatest insult of all, not even wasting time once he got here. The marine veteran grabbed the elastic brat and dropped him off in a bandit hideout and left to fend for himself. I felt no shame when I came up to him and proceeded to instigate a 3-hour-long brawl with the senseless grandfather for his decision. He has chosen it and I can only show my distaste for him. But the result wasn't all bad. Luffy had formed a camaraderie within the otherwise aggressive and hot-headed group, becoming a family in the otherwise unruly band. While I inherently dislike vagabonds, accepting the irony that I was technically one as well in my current and previous life, it seemed like Garp trusted the life of his grandson to the mountain bandit leader, Curly Dayton. So I had to accept and trust his judgment on this. I still didn't like that even though his Aniki and Nichan was still here, Luffy still felt alone. Though it was an interesting development when he became attached to one of the kids under Dayton's care, a kid named Portgas D. Ace. Though relations were stiff and aggressive between them, more so in Ace's side, Luffy was still very persistent on his chase to become Ace's friend. even leading to the elastic brat getting tied up by Ace and his other friend, Sabo. I was wary of the burly pirate that took Luffy away, but I let Ace and Sabo do the rest of the work in saving them. I could see a sense of brotherhood forming within them, and I wasn't about to interrupt such a development. Though I did not step away when I rushed over to the Grey Terminal to eliminate the bandits that had taken the 3 wannabe pirates and had planned to burn Luffy and Ace to death after sending home Sabo to a strict and unhappy life where he had no free will or choice while planning to burn the homes of everyone in Grey Terminal. Which added to an even greater annoyance to me, having to expend much chakra to create Hengid shadow clones to help Curly's bandits and the poorly disguised revolutionaries evacuate the people from the growing Inferno to the revolutionaries' ship. I couldn't reveal more of my powers as the revolutionaries were watching me closely, and I couldn't reveal more of what they already know of me. Though one situation after the event was particularly interesting. A few weeks ago, damn it, I shouted a multitude of times as I broke the 26th training dummy that I had my clones create, my hands bleeding from the heightened pain receivers to the point you could likely see the bones. Heck, a blind man could see the complete beating I took. The amount of cuts and bruises across my body were prominent around me, received earlier from a gauntlet bout against a multitude of shadow clones. All rounds the opposing forces had free use of brutal tactics and weapons. I needed to take me away from the shame and anger, and pain was the most applicable option. I shouldn't have forgotten that not all of the idiocy and ruthlessness comes from one source. Now my indecisiveness has cost me. A group of nobles had gone and killed Sabo while he was sailing away from the kingdom because it would have insulted the world noble that would have passed by the same route. And these weren't a group of nobles from the world government. No, they were a group greedy nobles from Goa Kingdom that had slain my charge's sworn brother. A brother I failed to protect. Luckily for me, the Goa Kingdom shall never find out the suspect of who murdered the number of nobles that would have mainly benefited from this. And from that they should keep being fearful. Surprisingly, the brown-haired world noble that had passed through was shocked at the implications of the burning of Grey Terminal and the witnessing of the killing of a small, defenseless child. Even more so, had degraded and shamed the nobles for such actions, saying that the memory of Mariajoy reliving in her head and seeing the same thing happen to others once more, explicitly and eccentrically demanding that for every one of the people that lived in the Grey Terminal that had lost something or someone, the kingdom had to pay Faye a great fee for reparations. The last thing I would have expected from a world noble, though one factor was shocking to everyone. The said world noble, while still keeping the same hairstyle that almost all had fashioned, had foregone the bulbous suit that the world nobles were known for and had sported a form-fitting kimono that had purple floral designs, though it seemed she still held some value for the tradition, as a tight, insulated bodysuit was under her dress as seen on her hands, her neck cover that connected with the gas mask that she wore in place of a sluggish glass bubble, the gas mask covering only the bottom half of her face as she sported a white veil and orange shades over her eyes. The arguments that she wasn't a world noble was silenced with the appearance of a rather carefree, yellow monkey, of an admiral that had accompanied her as he was on the same journey, and a newly titled shichibukai who was on the same path till he saw the fires, supporting her authenticity. Though he and I never really paid attention to the fearful stammerings of the common nobles once we both appeared out of nowhere. Though I couldn't figure out this feeling that the world noble and I had met long ago. Tiring myself out of rage, I kneel down on the grass, heaving and nearly retching at the physical stress my body is going through after focusing so much chakra into augmenting my physical attributes and pain sensitivity. I was here drowning myself in pain. Ace was tied up on a tree, shouting his pains to the world that had covered its ears, and Luffy was crying his heart out. Pathetic of me, really. But before I could go back to my self-torture, I felt a massive amount of power that dwarfed mine flare up very close to the training field. I order my clones to dispel and leaving 4 to form a manji formation around me, each one covering my sides as I pulsed chakra around me to discover the unseen force. What I sensed worried me greatly. The overwhelming force wasn't just coming from one side, it absolutely covered miles of land, the training field right in the center of the source, and I couldn't pinpoint where the power was emanating from. "You don't have to worry about a fight, kid." A gruff voice emanated from right behind me, earning a surprised look from me and the 4 clones, flickering away from the source. Flashing a distance away from the voice, our eyes meet 2 impossibilities, one we were glad and thankful for, and the other we couldn't decide whether to be shocked or expectant about it, rather, him. Long green cloak with a white garb underneath, spiky black hair with a widow's peak hairstyle with a stubble and the rather prominent red tribal tattoos on the left side of his face, and a sinister grin supported his already intimidating visage. What we saw was Dragon D. Monkey, the leader of the revolutionaries, the most wanted and most dangerous man of the world, who was currently carrying Sabo under his arm. Don't worry, I'm not looking for a fight, rather I'm thankful for your efforts, continued Dragon, seeing as I wasn't going to move from my spot. This man is someone I couldn't keep up with, not yet. I could compare this back to when I could only give Naruto second-long openings in Madara's defense. I could open holes in his defenses, but it'd only last a few moments, not enough for me or my clones to capitalize on. Thankful for what? I questioned as I positioned myself in a defensive stance, the clones and I forming a circle around him. I wasn't gonna take any chances. Taking care of my son while I was away. The sinister grin he sported seemed to fade, and what replaced with was a rather solemn and truly thankful look. Seeing that I eased up when he revealed his true intentions and the odds against me, he continued, that in your own way, bringing justice on this world, Ulfric. Scoffing at his joking tone, I finally started having full conversations with him, like your dad had left me much choice. I argued, either I become the world gov's unruly lapdog, or it would be a longer trek to the goal of fixing the mess executing Roger left. Dragon then proceeded to laugh at my expense. That's why I have people like you deal with it, he said, chuckling. I'd do more damage than good in my part. Besides, the One Piece kickstarted the Age of Pirates, didn't it? Playing the part of the devil's advocate. I can't argue with that. After that a silence grew between us and we knew there was one last problem to deal with. What do you plan to do with him? Getting to the point immediately after, even if it would have been seen as overly paranoid, but being a shinobi one can never be too paranoid. What I didn't expect was for the infamous revolutionary to adopt a saddened look. No matter the consequences, I will never let my own son join the revolutionaries, nor will I, and even Garp, let the world government find out that he's my son. He admitted before bringing up a cold, unreadable expression, but we're too short of numbers for our front against the world government. We need more manpower. That set me off, the clones and I rushing forward with katas unsheathed and going for overhead blows. I'm tired of children soldiers, intent on stopping his plans for the blonde kid. We barely made any progress, Dragon bringing up a free arm and using his wrist to block the sharp blades, only getting to pressure his arm downwards, but was only a slight push to him. I don't like it either, he conceded, before launching us off him, spinning quickly, landing backhand blows against us, knocking me far and dispelling the clones I had. But I need the numbers, though I don't intend on making this kid a meat shield. He'll learn under my wing, I owe it to my son. He argued back, besides, he's perfect for the revolution, he'll become the symbol of hope for my people. And why is that? I asked, slightly furious at the inferiority that was my attempted assault. Dragon's face showed a proud smirk. He's the first noble I know to ever be ashamed of his heritage. Back to present. Despite her actions, Dayton does genuinely care for him. Makino eased, pulling me from my flashback. She has to keep up face after all, with all the robberies and ambushes and the likes. Rolling my eyes at her easiness and casual-like attitude with the bandit leader once she got to know the incredibly brutish woman. Garp is a good man. She pressed on. You can't expect him to be everywhere for Luffy. He still has his duties as a marine. Now lying beside me on the bed. But still, I tried to argue back, but her snuggling up to me cut all further thoughts and arguments. Hush, Garp trusts her and we'll just have to believe in his trust, she concluded, which earned her a tired hug and a defeated sigh. Fine, I finally complied, annoyed, getting a smile from her. So when are you going to be teaching the two about your jutsu? She brought up another important issue after a moment of comfortable silence. I gone with Makino's proposal early in the year and I had taught the town's militia a good level of weapon skills and marksmanship, while teaching them the academy's taijutsu style and proper medical procedures, while I taught Makino herself a good level of taijutsu, some genjutsu and ninjutsu, but primarily she learned the upper echelons of medical ninjutsu, making her dangerous with her advanced knowledge of the body and pressure points, somewhat below the levels of Kabuto and Shizune, so as to prepare the time that I'd be leaving for the seas. A high chunin at best and enough knowledge to pass on the techniques I have taught her. I'm still getting to it. Smirking victoriously at her pouting face before continuing, Luffy shows great chakra stores, meaning he'll have greater difficulty in the more precision-demanding techniques till he gets more proper training and familiarity with control, but I doubt that'll work with his carefree attitude, so that means I'll have to teach him the more destructive arts. Those require less controls, but I'm gonna have to focus on techniques that incorporates to his martial arts skill. Looking amusingly at her scared look when she imagined Luffy just nonchalantly using world-shaking techniques, but I continued nonetheless. Ace though shows a more balanced level of good control and reserves for a kid of his age. From there I'll be able to giving a more mixed and varied style in his techniques. I can sense that he'll have a great affinity in fire. He has the will and the headstrong attitude for it, but I still have to test his aptitudes first, getting a more relaxed expression from her. So they'll have to go through the same routine with them as well. Hinting at my sadistic training regime, which got an evil smile out of me, a smile that at some point shared likeness to a pervy sage, a thunder god, a old warhawk and a god of shinobi. To be honest, they're idiots. I'm gonna have to either beat the information into them, or make them work themselves to death till they will never even consider forgetting my teachings. Bringing a jokingly dejected look from Makino. I can't really ask for you to go easy on them, can I? She rhetorically asked. They'll hate me by the end of the first week, I assured her with an even more evil smile. Quote. Good night, Hokuro-san, she finally ended with a slightly tired and amused voice. Good night, Makino-chan, I replied uselessly as she was already sound aside me, her breaths more peaceful and graceful on my chest. Sighing thankfully before deciding to rest once more, as I partly planned and dreamed my tour training for the two brats. Why do I feel like I'm going to partly regret teaching those two? I finally thought before the open arms of sleep surrounded me. Good, fast and uninhibited transition from hand signs and no issue with chakra flow. Regarded a young man with silver white hair and dulled eyes, completely unfazed at the unnatural wrath of fire coming towards him. Only to fade away in an after-image just before the fireball completely engulfed the area he used to be. And appeared right behind the young boy. But not fast enough for my standards. He countered with a chop to the back of the kid's head, knocking him down to the ground, leaving the kid in a huffing, exhausted stature. Practice more on familiarizing yourself with the hand signs and not putting too much energy in your attacks and you're clear in that jutsu. He summed up with a satisfied tone. We might get you starting on the more advanced techniques, but another fast approaching object came at him, which took form of a long extending fist coming right at the back of the man's head. Gomu Gomu dynamic fist, roared another voice a distance away from the man's backside, though this proved to be a mistake when his fist almost came into contact with the man's head. The man merely swayed slightly to the left, letting the still stretching fist to fly past him, grabbing onto the forearm with his right hand in a crushing grip. Good use of variety in fighting techniques, impressive use of teamwork with distraction to make a hit at my blind spot, and interesting mix of chakra-enhanced durability and strength with your devil fruit abilities. He analyzed the move in a moment before pulling back the arm roughly, and making a cross-shaped hand sign as another kid was pulled out of the trees. Double dynamic entry, only to be kicked twice at the same time by the man who was now accompanied by another who bore extreme likeness with him who puffed into smoke after the maneuver, the impact directly focusing on the kid's face. The kid was launched a fair distance away, but the kid was able to recover in the air and landing on his 2 feet quickly with only dust gathered in his face and not a single bruise on him. But you're lacking in speed and I could sense your anticipation easily. He concluded before giving his answer, only announce your technique once you are absolutely sure the move will connect. The bout continued, both kids aiming to get at the man, who continuously dodged and countered their strikes. After what seemed like forever, the man finally stopped in his motion and directly blocked 2 blows coming from both sides, and grabbing the 2 boys' arms and slamming them down on the ground. Huffing in amusement, he commented, "Nice try, you're lasting longer," before a ringing alarm went off. But not enough to pass, he concluded before turning away from both of them, which resulted in both of them launching up quickly from their fallen forms and making a quick blow at him. "You never said the fight ends at the ring," one of the kids with a stitched scar in his left cheek and wore a straw hat retorted. "And now we got yo," the other older boy continued to finish. sporting rather childish freckles and a tattoo on his left arm written, ASCE, vertically but with the S crossed out. But the man merely poofed, leaving a large amount of smoke, comically dropping two of the kids on the ground once more. The result was having the man appear a distance away from them, now sporting a conical farmer's hat, a simple white coat flown over his shoulders, and wore a very justified cocky grin, who was looking at the dumbfounded duo who were looking at the log in front of them in surprise. Good, you learned one thing from this lesson at least, making the two look at him in confusion. In the world out there, fighting is the most dominant power. Stature and renown doesn't matter if you can't fight back, so don't hold anything back and damn the rules of fighting unless it is specified of the person's honor, but I make an exception for backstabbers and tyrants. Making the two nod. Anything other than skill didn't really matter in a fight, so they still didn't understand the lesson the man was teaching, as they knew that already. Though there is still one thing I want to teach you before we go. As time will pass, you will develop your own rules and beliefs in your own crew. But one thing is all you need to learn, that you must take heart, the very teaching passed down from my Jiji-sama, to an Ero Sanin, to my sensei and to me and my teammates, the belief that my very father died following. Each word gaining emphasis, seriousness every passing second, a powerful fire burning in the man's pale gray eyes. Those who break the rules are scum. Getting even more confused looks from the two before he continued, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. The kids' faces turned into surprise and recognition of respect. One of them fully realized and understood the teaching. Many of my comrades died to protect their loved ones, and I would join them doing the same. So you will fight to protect your crew with your very lives. At the very least, do the best that you can, or don't even think that you'll have chance of ever being great pirate captains. At the determined nod from both boys, the man replaced the serious tension with a joyful outlook as he reappeared right behind the two and smacked them across the head and ran down the road leading to a village at incredible speed. Last one to the village buys all the ramen. The man shouted back with a silly grin at the two boys who were dashing at similar speeds after him, both sporting similarly cheerful expressions. But unnoticed by the boys were two figures standing atop one of the tree's branches, possibly having been there the whole time. So, one of them asked the other, wearing a large white coat with the kanji for earth, fire, water, wind and lightning on the right arm and a red spiral symbol on the left. Under the coat was a navy blue uniform with a sealed green military jacket. What do you think? The other merely nodded grimly. Sporting formal white suit over a navy blue shirt and aqua tie, and left flowing over his shoulders was a large coat with red and blue epaulettes on its shoulders. The person's face was obscured by the dog mask, but it was clear that he had a gray unkempt, if short beard. This is my condition, the first man continued. I join your damned, glorified sellswords of a group, and these two will get to choose their own destiny. You know at some point you will have to fight them, right? The other man in the dog mask finally spoke. Meh, the merely shrugged. It'll be a good test to see how far they've come, and do you honestly think I would harm a hair on them, let alone kill them? At the other's silence, the white-robed man flickered out of the area with a flash of silver lightning striking the place he was on, flashy transportation at its finest. The man with the dog mask merely looked thoughtful where he was, before thinking aloud, the brat makes a point, Roger, but what is more important? He asked to no one in particular, my duty and justice. Our family and what is morally right. But his depressing thoughts were cut of as the branch he was on finally gave to the weight, the lightning smashing on its bark being the last straw, and flopped the bewildered man down on the ground. Hokuer ou, barked the masked man, echoing throughout the island, causing a shiver to the man with the two kids, a mischievous snigger from the white-robed man and a satisfied smile on a changed bandit leader. A year ago, Marineford meeting room. No pav, here we go again, complained an elderly woman wearing a admiral's coat over her shoulders as she sat in the large round table, lazily watching two other men with admiral coats fighting with swords, one completely dumbfounded of the other's actions and another twitching and convulsing in every movement he made, as if it was out of his control. Fufafufafufu, this is getting incredibly dull, woman, of course I would need something to do to pass the time. Cheekily replied a mirthful man wearing a pink feather coat, red dotted white pants and thin curved sunglasses, though his size wasn't properly attributed with him sitting cross-legged on the middle of the table, but comparing him with the other men saw him being significantly taller than them. His hand was stretched out, in the direction of the two men fighting, as if he was a puppeteer, playing with dolls. Another man of considerable size, almost a bear, was sitting in the table, rather impassive of the entire thing, wearing clothing that had a slight edge at a theme of bears, was clutching a Bible on his left hand, acting as if the fight in the room wasn't happening at all. Honestly, I've never felt more bored in my life. Dismissed a mysterious man who preferred to stand at the far wall of the room than sit, wearing a open long coat, simple pants and boots, a chain holding a cross prominent on his bare chest, but the incredibly large and heavily decorated sword that had the shape of a cross on his back outclassed all prominent things about him. I still don't know why I bother coming to these worthless meetings. For once I am in agreement with you, noted a majestic woman, who was wearing an incredibly revealing red robe, and had a white coat that had epaulets over her shoulders, similar to a marine's coat. Though she was not sitting in the chairs like the swordsman but was near the tables and in fact, beside one of the chairs of the table, but was sitting on an incredibly large white snake that wore a large horned skull on its head that had blue hair jutting from its back. Its body was adorned by red spots while its underbelly was yellow. It seemed to have a permanent smile on its face. I was called here because the Marines had made this an urgent meeting and hadn't said nothing else, but now I see that this was a perfect waste of time. At this she and the swordsman moved to leave the room. But before any other commotion could be made, a large man came into the room, wearing a marine coat and under that, a formal uniform adorned in medals and honors. He wore a marine's cap, which is covering the puffy hair under it. He also bore a mustache and a braided beard. He was accompanied into the room by a goat and a seagull. Enough with this commotion, the meeting can now commence, the man stated, earning affirmatives from his subordinates, referring to him as Fleet Admiral, and groans of annoyance from the others apart from one, some taking seats improperly and some staying on their spot, the swordsman in his side of the wall, and the flamingo man on the center of the table. This meeting is to assess the formal introduction of the new shichibukai Ulfric Daemon. Getting clear disinterest from the non-Marines apart from two, some prompting to leave the room but halted when the Admiral continued. And the fate of Hokuro de Seftis, suddenly piquing the interest of the room and the shock of the snake woman. Hokuro had become a name of mixed meaning in the world government. The nobles despise him for the destruction of Mariajoy and insulting their honor, while the Marines were torn between respecting him for his sense of justice and actions to pushing the world to a better place, pushing some Marines to accepting moral justice than its absolute counterpart and believing the disappearance self-serving corrupt nobles in the Goa kingdom was of his actions and are praising him, while others are still had a grudge against him for the deaths of their comrades back at Mariajoy and some for the occasional assassination of a Marine officer. But before they could discuss more on the situation, a pillar of black flame suddenly erupted from the balcony connected to the room, alerting the occupants of the room, some motioning to attack, but the others, namely the non-Marines and the Fleet Admiral, have yet to make a move. At ease, the old woman Admiral commanded the Marines to relax, causing them to sheathe their weapons warily as the flames slowly dispersed to reveal a man standing in the midst. Combed back golden hair, scruff shadow of a beard, sharp but rugged features and steel-cold eyes. His regal and powerful look was backed up by an equally fierce attire. Black steel armor with intricate and ancient designs adorned his chest, shoulders, lower arms and lower legs, strapped tightly over dark noble clothes. Over it was a gray fur-trimmed cloak, completing his completely cold aura. His posture wasn't a slouch either. He stood arrogantly and defiantly against almost everyone in the room. A left-hand grip on a sheathed dark sword was unflinching and ready to be drawn at moment's notice. It seems most of the royal warlords have given me the honor of visiting my induction. I should feel proud. The man sarcastically, head held high in arrogance and earning a snake woman's ire and a flamingo man's sadistic amusement. But the man named Ulfric merely ignored them and turned to the elderly woman, right arm wrapped onto his plate and slightly bowed in respect. "It is good to meet you again, Obasan," he acknowledged, bringing great shock to the group. Sans said annoyed elder admiral. "Let's just get this over with before I pull a gasket," the elder woman merely said before nodding towards the fleet admiral to continue. "As I was saying," the fleet admiral continued, "this is Ulfric Daemon, captain of the Shadow Guard pirates and the warlord of the sea for the East Blue," before looking at the addressed with sharp, dangerous eyes, "and currently the only one that holds the knowledge of Hokuru's fate. The end. Now we will see you in the next